There are wounds that don't bleed, they simply etch themselves into the face of a mother who once loved too much. That day, I heard my daughter speak, her voice sweet as dew but cold as steel. "Mom, sign it. Let us hold this beach house to keep it safe." On the table lay a transfer contract, the house worth $300,000, the dream I'd spent half a lifetime to dare to touch. I looked at my two children, once the light of my life, now two strangers counting digits in their mother's eyes. I didn't cry. I poured more tea, smiled softly, and set my hand on the recorder button fixed under the table. Outside, the waves kept breaking steady like my heart, slow, steady, and no longer afraid. Because sometimes, the moment you realize family ties also have a price is when you finally learn the true value of freedom. And I just sat there, calmly watching the first day of their payback begin. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Josephine Myers, 67 years old, living in Clearwater, Florida, where the sea is crystal blue and the wind tastes as salty as memory. For 10 years, Mother's Day has been nothing more than a quiet morning to me. No knock at the door, no flowers delivered, only the ticking wall clock and the old air conditioner's soft breath. I still woke early as usual, brewed coffee, set the table, and laid out the hand-embroidered cloth my mother left me, a habit no one remembered but me. I arranged white porcelain plates, set out butter cookies and a tray of fresh strawberries. I cooked Southern-style beef stew, the dish Lauren and Tyler once fought over as kids. Back then, whenever I made it, we'd sit around the table and laugh late into the night. Now, that kitchen held only the sound of a spoon tapping the pot and the smudged noise of fading memories. By 10 a.m., I checked my phone only to see a blank screen. No texts, no calls. I opened Facebook, telling myself maybe my kids were busy. Then a photo popped up right on top. Lauren, my daughter, at a fancy restaurant in Tampa, holding a glass of champagne, with Tyler and their friends beside her. The caption read, "Perfect Sunday with the people who matter most." I looked at that line 3-4 times until it blurred with the steam from my cup. The people who matter most. And I wasn't in that frame. I set the phone on the table and looked at the stew simmering gently. The smell of onion, garlic, carrots. Once the scent of family had become the smell of loneliness, seasoned to perfection. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt a very soft crack inside, like wind splitting a window pane. No one heard it but me. That afternoon, I took my meal out to the porch, watched the empty street, and felt hollow as cars drifted by. I thought, maybe next year will be different. Maybe they're just busy. But then memories rolled back like a slow film. Last year, my daughter texted me at 11 p.m. "Sorry, Mama. The day got away from one. Love you." Tyler stayed silent all day. Then a week later sent a short line. "Been busy, Mom." I realized their forgetting wasn't accidental anymore. It was a habit, grown large by my own silence. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the fan spin. I asked myself, when did I disappear from their lives? When they got married? When money arrived? Or when I stopped lending? I had sold my wedding ring to pay Lauren's tuition, mortgaged the house to help Tyler open a garage, and thought that was love. Turns out those sacrifices taught them that Mom is a given. The next morning I brewed coffee, but this time I skipped the usual milk. I wanted that bitterness to remind me it was time to wake up. I pulled out an old folder where I kept a few shares from my old company and a savings book I'd never touched. After doing the math, I saw I had enough $300,000, enough to buy a small beach house where I could start over. No one needed to know. No one needed permission. I booted up my old computer, checked Zillow, and scrolled through hundreds of listings. When I saw a white wooden house with 2 bedrooms and a big porch facing the sea, I stopped. Asking price, $299,000. Short description: a peaceful coastal home for a new beginning. I smiled. Maybe this was the invitation meant for me. I called Denise Harper, a local real estate agent who had helped my friend a few years back. Denise heard my voice and said, "If you truly want peace, I have a place that matches exactly what you sent. I think you'll love it." 2 days later, I took a bus for over 3 hours to St. Augustine, the oldest seaside city in America. The wind carried salt and a hint of jasmine from somewhere, and I felt lighter by the minute. The house sat on a small street shaded by palms. The white paint had yellowed, but the frames were solid. Denise opened the door with a warm smile. "Welcome to your new beginning." As I stepped in, the sound of waves drifted from afar, blending with wind teasing the windows, the kind of sound that makes you believe in good things. I said only 4 words: "I want to buy." A week later, the contract was done. I signed with a slightly shaky hand, but my heart felt light as air. For the first time in years, I did something just for me. Not for my kids, not for anyone, not to prove a thing. Denise hugged me in congratulations. But before leaving, she looked at me and said seriously, "Josephine, I say this because I care. When you move in, find your own attorney to make sure no one can challenge your ownership. I've seen too many people lose their assets to their own kids." I smiled, thinking it was just professional caution. But that night, when I played Tyler's voicemail, "Hey Mom, heard you bought a house. Must be nice having all that money saved up," my heart went cold. The next morning, I called Denise. She referred me to attorney Maya Chen, 35 years old, who specializes in protecting seniors' rights. At our first meeting, Maya sat across from me, clear and steady. "Miss Josephine, what you described, distant children who suddenly care when assets appear, is a classic pattern of financial abuse within families. I suggest creating a trust and setting up an evidence protection system. The sooner, the better." I nodded. We worked on the documents together. Maya helped me open a personal fund, set up legal powers of attorney, and install home security cameras. She even helped me buy a small recorder, a coin-sized button I could stick under the table. A week later, I moved into the new beach house. In the mornings, I opened the windows, breathed in the salt, and listened to gulls crying in the distance. I started a journal, recording each day as proof of my new life. For the first time in years, I didn't need a text message to know I still existed. Then, this year's Mother's Day came around again. I expected nothing, just planned a small lunch for myself: clam chowder and butter cookies. At 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Lauren and Tyler stood there with a man in a black suit, a briefcase in his hand. "Hi, Mom. We thought we'd surprise you." They hugged me lightly. Lauren's perfume drowned out the sea breeze. We sat at the table. I poured tea and asked gently, "It's been a while since you dropped by." Lauren smiled. "I just want to make sure you're safe in this house." I was surprised when the man opened his case and pulled out a stack of papers. "This is a transfer agreement. You just need to sign so they can hold it for you, avoid scams." I looked at the pages, tiny print and blank lines, waiting for my signature. Tyler added with a hint of pity, "We only want what's best for you. $300,000 isn't a small amount." I set the cookie plate down and looked at them one by one. In that moment, all the years of sacrifice, cold dinners, nights waiting by the phone, played backward like an old film. I said nothing. I just poured more tea, smiled, and let my hand slide under the table to brush the recorder button. The soft click blended with the distant surf. Outside, sunlight flickered on the tea like a small flame. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd sign today. But they didn't know that on this Mother's Day, they hadn't come to take. They'd come to start facing the price of what they'd done. Sometimes I ask myself, when do people start walking away from you when they leave home, or the moment they stop listening? After that Mother's Day lunch, when my children left behind half-finished teacups and an unsigned contract, I sat a long time in the kitchen. The scent of butter cookies still lingered, but the warmth had gone long ago. I looked out at the sea as sunlight slanted across the water, and the old years began to rewind in my mind, like a faded film. I once believed we were a small, happy family, just the three of us, but full of love. After my husband left for a younger woman, I had no time to cry. I worked 2 jobs, by day at a grocery store, by night cleaning hospital rooms. I remember the late shifts, the disinfectant soaking into my hands, and thinking, as long as Lauren and Tyler get a proper education, it's all worth it. Lauren was the good student, the one with kind words. I sold my wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry from happier times, to pay her college tuition. I smiled and said, one day you'll wear another ring, not to recall the past, but to start a future. She hugged me, promising she'd take care of me after graduation. I believed her. Tyler, my only son, had skillful hands and loved cars from the start. When he said he wanted to open a repair garage, I took out a bank loan and mortgaged the old house. I thought, if I push a few more years, he'll have a career. I didn't know that was the moment I signed an open-ended contract of sacrifice. Time passed, and while I lived by a packed work schedule, their calendars began to be empty of me. On holidays they'd say, "Mom, plans changed this year, we're traveling with friends." The first time I pretended to be cheerful, "Go ahead, I'm fine at home." The second time I only asked, "When will you be back?" By the third time I stopped asking. I still cooked full dinners and set 2 extra plates, habits of a mother who hadn't caught up to the fact that her kids had grown. Year by year, those plates stayed spotless from start to finish, because no one sat down. On my birthday, Lauren sent one single text, a cake emoji, a heart, no message, no call. I stared at it, imagining her face as she hit send, probably just a few seconds between a meeting or lunch with coworkers. Tyler was worse, he forgot. 3 days later, when I texted, "How are you?" he replied with 3 words. "Very busy, Mom." I asked myself, when did I slip out of their frame? Was it when they got their own homes, their own families? Or when I stopped answering loan requests and started saying no? I remember Lauren once came over, hugged me tight, and said she urgently needed $500 to pay the electric bill. I pulled out the cash, even though I had a little over $600 in my wallet. She promised to pay it back by the weekend. That weekend came and went, then the next month, then the next year, the promise buried under silence. Tyler was the same. Whenever the garage struggled, he'd call, "Mom, I just need a little. You understand?" I understood, and I gave. Until one day I opened my expense notebook and saw a total that stunned even me, over $70,000 in 4 years. I gave a sad smile. Not because I regretted the money, but because I realized love and trust had been drained. With nothing returned, I started screenshotting every text and saving call logs as a way to keep proof, not to sue, but to remind myself never to forget the truth. I created a folder on my computer called Silent Years. Whenever I felt weak, I opened it and reread each line. "Mom, it's urgent. Just this once. I'm busy. Talk later." And I remembered why I had to be strong. Neighbors sometimes asked, "Haven't seen your daughter visit?" I just smiled. I learned to cushion the question with a smile. Inside, though, each question snipped one more thread tying me to hope. I stopped setting the table for ghosts, stopped calling just to hear a half-hearted voice, stopped waiting for goodnight texts. One summer evening, I watched a travel show about Florida beach homes. The sunset on the screen made me want to live again, not as a forgotten mother, but as a woman who still deserves peace. I opened my computer and created a new folder titled Coast Plan. I wrote out each line. Estimated home price: $300,000. Furniture: minimal, self-decorated. Home insurance: choose expanded safety coverage. Moving costs: $2,500. Emergency fund: $15,000 for legal situations. I wrote with a shaky hand, but each word was a piece of strength I took back for myself. I began selling what I didn't need: the vintage teacup collection, a few old paintings, the armchair my husband used to sit in, posted them all online. The house grew emptier, and strangely, I could breathe better than ever. The more space I cleared, the louder I heard my own voice. "You've endured enough, Josephine." Each morning, I opened the window to sunlight falling on a table set for one. I brewed coffee, watched the steam rise, and whispered, "It's okay. One is enough." Then, on a February night with a soft rain, I stood before the bathroom mirror under the yellow light. The lines by my eyes and mouth, each one a record of a patient year, I touched my cheek and said aloud, as if making a promise to myself, "I will stand by me." That small sound warmed my chest, like someone had opened a door. I slept better that night than I had in years. No more dreaming of a ringing phone, no more waking to phantom chimes. Just rain pattering on the roof, and a peace I'd never known. The next morning, I got up early and mailed my resignation. I decided to sell the old house and move somewhere new, where the past couldn't cling. Inside the envelope, I tucked a small note to myself. "Don't be afraid of losing your children. Be afraid of losing yourself without noticing." From then on, I prepared for freedom. I took 3 months to gather funds, check documents, and sign. No one in the family knew. I no longer felt guilty about keeping a secret. I felt calm, because this time, the secret still belonged to me. Sometimes, Lauren called not to ask how I was, but to share about her husband's promotion or her child's high test score. I listened, nodded, and ended with, "That's wonderful. I'm happy for you." Tyler, whenever money ran short, texted, "Mom, help me one last time." I still replied, "I'm not able to anymore." No anger, no tears, just a deliberate quiet. When everything was ready, I packed. I took only a few books, some old photo frames, and a small notebook scrawled with, "Start again where there's the sound of waves." On the day I left, I didn't leave a message, just a small note on the door. "I'm going to look for what you forgot, peace." And so I left. No fanfare, no one seeing me off. Just me, a suitcase, and a dream that waited half a lifetime. I'd heard people say, everyone has a place meant for them, it's just that not everyone is brave enough to go find it. For me, that place appeared one March morning when I stumbled on a Zillow listing: 2-bedroom wooden house, windows facing the sea, wide porch, to catch the wind, price $299,000. Description: a house for a new beginning. I stopped for a long time. The first photo showed a silver-white house, paint peeling a bit, nestled among green palms, the horizon a deep blue in the distance. A large window faced the ocean, a long wooden porch, and an old rope-hung swing. Something in that image touched me, a peace that felt like I'd lived there in a dream. I called Denise Harper, the agent recommended by an old friend. Her voice was bright and sincere. "Hello, Miss Josephine. If you're truly seeking peace, I think I've found the very house." 2 days later, we met in Street Augustine, the oldest seaside city in America. The sky was glass blue, the wind carried salt and jasmine. Denise arrived with her blonde hair tied up, a white linen dress, and a small ring of keys. "Are you running away or running toward?" she teased, half serious. I looked out at the sea and smiled. Both. The house sat on a quiet little street paved with coral stone. The walkway was dusted with fine sand, flanked by pink bougainvillea. When Denise opened the door, the smell of salt and old wood rushed in, as if the house had its own soul. Light poured through the big window, scattering on floating dust like the sun lived with me. "This belonged to an elderly couple," Denise said, opening each window to let the wind in. "They moved to live with their daughter in Maine. Paperwork's clean, just need a roof and foundation check." I walked slowly through the living room. Chestnut-colored walls, bright floors. From the kitchen corner, you could see the outline of the surf, the thing I'd dreamed of for years. Under the stairs, a little shelf still held one old novel, The Old Man and the Sea. I smiled. Maybe that was a good sign. Denise led me to the porch. "I think you'll like this most." She pushed the door open, and there was a vast stretch of blue. The wind tossed my hair, the surf rolled, gulls cried far away. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, it felt like I'd just found my real heartbeat. "Miss Josephine?" Denise said softly. I opened my eyes. "I want to buy." Denise looked slightly surprised. "No more time to think?" I shook my head. "I've been thinking my whole life." We sat at the porch table to go over the steps. Denise called in an appraiser to check the roof, foundation, electrical, and plumbing. Everything was solid, just needed a few paint touch-ups and a glass pane replaced. I made the deposit that day. When I wired $300,000, my hand trembled. It was the money I once meant to leave for later. To my kids, like so many American mothers who believe their children deserve an inheritance. But now I understood. If you don't live fully while you are alive, leaving any amount behind is pointless. I wanted my later to start right now. That evening, I went back to a small motel. Wind rattled the finest window. The sound of waves tapped a far-off rhythm. I looked at the transfer receipt stamped, completed, and exhaled. I texted Denise, "Thank you. I'm not buying a house today. I'm buying myself back." She replied with a single heart emoji. I didn't tell Lauren or Tyler. For the first time in 40 years of being a mother, I had a secret I didn't share. Not because I feared objections, but because I wanted to keep a piece of life that wouldn't be judged. Before finalizing the paperwork, I sent everything to Maya Chen, the young attorney who had helped me set up documents to protect seniors' rights. She reviewed the purchase contract, then nodded slightly. "This house is in your name. No one can touch it unless you sign. But I recommend creating a living trust to protect the asset if anything unexpected happens later," I agreed. Maya helped me open a separate account, clearly stating, "The ultimate beneficiary will be chosen by me when I want, not when someone forces it." She also advised me to invest in security. I bought a 4-camera system with 90-day cloud storage mounted at the front door, back door, porch, and kitchen. Not because I feared burglars, but because I feared the uninvited return of those who once treated me like a place to take from. I wrote down all necessary contacts on a list called Emergency Contacts 1. Denise Harper, Realtor and new friend. A2. Maya Chen, Attorney, legal contact. And 3. Dean Morales, Deputy County Sheriff, whom I know from volunteering at the Women's Association. 4. Dr. Mary Goldberg, family doctor who understands my health. I printed the list, laminated it, and stuck it behind the front door. Everything was organized and logical, as if I were rewriting my life from the beginning, but this time in my own handwriting. On key handover day, Denise drove over to pick me up. She put on some light jazz and said, "I love seeing people find their home." I smiled and answered, "And I love the feeling of not having to explain. When the car turned onto the sandy lane, I saw the house appearing between two rows of palms. Sunlight slanted through the leaves, scattering shimmering patches on the wooden walls like waves. The white door swung open. Wind rushed in, carrying the scent of the sea and of beginnings. I stepped inside, placed my hand on the wood, and felt warmth left by the sun. I spoke softly, almost a whisper. "From now on, I belong here." Denise laughed. "And this house has the owner it deserves." We opened the windows to let the breeze pass through every room, brushing away old dust. Denise helped me set the table again and hang a nameplate, "Josephine's house," by the door. She said, "Every house has its own soul. You just need to give it breath." In the afternoon after she left, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset slide down the water. I turned on the old radio the previous owners left. Frank Sinatra drifted softly. The sea wind slipped through my hair, reminding me of evenings when I was young and believed peace existed only in songs. But now I knew. It was truly here, all around me. I brewed a cup of tea, set it on the railing, and gazed out. The sea poured gold, birds gliding by and leaving thin black strokes like memory. I said quietly to myself, "All right, Josephine, you finally came home." That first night, I put on fresh sheets, turned off the lights, and left the window cracked for the breeze. The waves were steady like a lullaby. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of a ringing phone. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the big window, lighting the dry salt streaks on the railing. I made coffee and sat on the porch steps, watching fishermen haul their nets in the distance. No traffic noise, no city sounds, only wind and sea and me. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, "New Chapter." Inside it, I wrote the first line. Today, I officially stepped into the rest of my life, not to wait for anyone, but to live. I saved it, closed the laptop, and looked at the ocean again. The water shone like a mirror, reflecting my face, aged, but no longer sorrowful. It was the face of someone newly free. After I moved into the wave-facing house, I thought I was safe enough. But soon I realized peace needs protection too, not with locks, but with clarity. Maya, the young attorney I trusted, called me on a Monday morning. Her voice was firm but warm. "Miss Josephine, now that you have your own home and independent assets, the next step is to make sure that if anything happens, every decision still belongs to you and no one can change it." I stayed quiet for a few seconds, listening to the surf outside the porch. Then I answered, "Go on, Maya." She sent me a list, a new will, medical and financial POAs, powers of attorney, a statement of assets, and even guidance on setting secure bank passwords. "You must designate who's allowed to act on your behalf if you can't sign," Maya said clearly. I knew she meant my children, Lauren and Tyler, those who once used taking care of Mom as a banner to seize that power. I said softly, "I won't let anyone decide my life again." 3 days later, Maya came to the house. We sat on the porch while the afternoon light tilted through the palms. She opened her laptop and read each clause: Healthcare proxy, Dr. Mary Goldberg, financial agent, Maya Chen. Will beneficiary, not disclosed. I signed. The pen moved slow and sure, like carving a vow. From now on, no one could sign for me unless I allowed it. When Maya left, she squeezed my hand. "You did what many can't, setting boundaries with your own family. That's not selfish, it's self-preservation." I nodded, a small but honest smile. That evening, I began standardizing security at home. I ordered a video doorbell that connects to my phone with cloud storage. Dean, the Deputy sheriff I know from volunteering with the Women's Association helped me install it. He showed me how to enable motion sensors, change the Wi-Fi password, and create a separate guest password. You'll be surprised, Dean smiled. A lot of asset grab cases start because someone knew the victim's Wi-Fi password. I laughed, never imagining something so small mattered. But inside, I felt grateful to him, a man who speaks little and does much. Dean also suggested a wall safe. He said, "Don't keep everything at the bank. You need a secure spot inside your home." I did exactly that. The safe was mounted behind an old painting in my bedroom. I carefully placed inside my passport, savings book, home purchase documents, insurance policies, and a USB drive with screenshots of texts, call logs, and my bank statements. I photocopied everything in duplicate, one set to Maya, one set for Denise to keep at her real estate office. Denise didn't ask much. She simply rested a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Stay cautious. Not because you're paranoid, but because they made you be." I went quiet. The truth in that line made my heart sting. A week later, I received a reminder letter for a routine checkup from Dr. Howard Feld, the geriatrician. I proactively added a request for a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. When I said that, "Doctor?" Feld looked at me curiously. I smiled. "Just to make sure I'm sharper than people think." He chuckled and agreed. The assessment lasted over 2 hours. He asked how many words I could recall after 3 minutes, had me redraw shapes, then posed hypothetical financial scenarios. When we finished, he nodded and signed the record. Good cognition, independent reasoning, no signs of decline. I looked at that paper and felt relief. It wasn't just a medical record, it was a legal shield if someone ever tried to claim I was incompetent. But there was something else I needed: inner quiet. I found Dr. Naomi Price, a therapist in town. Her office was small, with landscape paintings and a gentle mint scent. On the very first day, she asked, "What's hardest for you, Josephine?" I answered honestly, saying no to my children. We spoke over many sessions. Dr. Price helped me see that kindness doesn't mean accepting harm. She taught me simple phrases I'd never dared to say. "No, I can't lend you money anymore. No, I don't agree to let you decide for me. No, I need rest. I don't need to keep proving my love." The first time I practiced those words, my throat tightened. But gradually, they grew lighter. Dr. Price said, "You're relearning the language of self-respect. It isn't loud, but it carries weight." At the same time, I began archiving every piece of evidence. I made a folder on my computer called "If There's a Case." Inside were screenshots of messages, bank histories, repair invoices, ownership certificates, and weekly backed-up security camera clips. I noted dates, times, and people involved. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I refused to let truth be taken again. I also started a Coast journal. Each morning before coffee, I wrote down one thing I was grateful for. Day 1, I'm grateful I can still hear the waves. Day 10, I'm grateful I've learned to sleep without waiting for the phone. Day 30, I'm grateful I've stopped being afraid. The journal slowly thickened, handwriting slanted, ink in blue and brown, each line a brick I used to build my peace. I also formed a morning walk habit. At 5:30, before sunrise, the wind tasted salty and the sand was still cold. I walked the shoreline, counting waves instead of promises. They say the waves are never the same, yet they always return just like me. Even pushed far, I still found my way back to myself. Sometimes I met neighbors exercising, Mr. Martin walking his dog, Miss Ruth picking shells. We greeted one another, then quietly watched the sea. Few words were needed, just the sense that each of us was seeking our own peace. After a few weeks, I noticed my phone rang less. Lauren stopped calling often. Tyler sent one text asking if, "You still have your savings?" I replied, "I'm fine, don't worry." That was it. No more, no explanations. I wasn't a 24/7 switchboard for my kids anymore. Instead, I started caring for myself in the simplest ways. Every morning I swam not in a warm pool, but in the real ocean where the cold water numbed my skin. At first I only waded near shore, water to my knees. Then, day by day, I went farther. The cold sliced like a blade, yet each swim felt like my brain rinsed away old memories. I called it my neural rebirth therapy. "Doctor," Price said, "you've found your own way back to life." In the evenings I wrote my monthly plan: renew home insurance, update account passwords, send thank you, notes to Denise and Dean, water plants, replace porch bulbs. Each bullet was small, but for me it was how I maintained sovereignty over my life. No one did those things for me anymore, and no one was allowed to take away that sense of control. One late night, while I was folding a blanket, the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up and heard a man. "Mrs. Josephine Myers? I'm with the insurance company. We need to verify ownership of the house in street." Augustine. I paused for a few seconds, then smiled. "I'm the homeowner. I have all documents. Tell me what you need, and I'll send it immediately through my attorney." The line went silent for a few beats, then disconnected. "Do you have a mother or father living alone?" After the line, "I'll send it through my attorney." What else do you think they should prepare? Share what you've experienced in the comments. Your story might help protect someone else's peace. I sat on the sofa and felt my heart beat slow and steady. No more shaking. No more fear. I realized, when you prepare thoroughly, others run out of chances. That night, I went out to the porch and watched the moon rise over the ocean. Silver light stretched like a giant mirror. I poured a small glass of wine, raised it, and whispered, "To a new Josephine, who knows how to say no, how to keep quiet, and how to believe she deserves peace." The wind moved through the porch carrying salt and warm wood. In the dark, I felt safer than ever. 3 quiet weeks passed, as if the sea conspired with me, keeping all secrets in its waves. Every morning I still walked the sand with a small notebook to write that day's gratitude. My life was simple, almost meditative. Morning coffee, a few lines in my journal, sunlight through the window, the mingled scents of salt and wood. I began to believe that Lauren and Tyler had stopped caring, or at least stopped trying to interfere. But on a Friday afternoon, the phone rang. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. My heart slowed a beat. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice floated in smooth as honey, sweet to the point of counterfeit. "Mom, where are you?" "I miss you so much." Those 3 words, "miss you so much," fell light as feathers, but I heard the metal hidden inside. I leaned back and kept my tone even. "You miss me? It's been 3 weeks without a single text, and today you suddenly miss me?" Lauren gave a strained laugh. "I know. I was wrong. But I've been so busy, Mom. Where are you living? I'll drive over. I just want to see you." I was silent a few seconds, then asked, "Who gave you my address?" There was a pause. Very short, but enough for me to understand. Well," a neighbor said. "They saw you move. I just want to make sure you're okay." I pressed my lips together. A clumsy answer, and I marked it red in my mind. No one in the old neighborhood had this address. I'd carefully erased every trace, which meant someone had been digging. I said quietly, "I'm fine, Lauren, thank you. But today I'm busy another time." "That's okay, Mom," she said, too fast and too bright. "I'm already on my way. You'll be happy to see us." I looked at the phone after she hung up, the black screen reflecting my face calm but taut as a wire. The sea wind kicked up, carrying the damp smell of rain. I opened the security camera app and checked every angle. Green indicators glowed steady. The images were clear. Front gate, porch, living room, kitchen. The mics were live, everything under control. I texted Maya quickly. My daughter called. She has the address. Bad feeling. In under a minute, a new message popped up. Don't let them in. Dean and I are on our way. I breathed deep. Each breath tasted of salt, fear, and resolve mixed together. About 40 minutes later, an engine sounded on the road. I stepped onto the porch. A shiny black SUV stopped at the gate the kind people rent when they've got big business to do. The door opened. Tyler got out first, shirt buttoned to the top, eyes sweeping the yard, appraising every square foot. Lauren followed with a large handbag, heels sinking slightly into the sand. Finally, a stranger appeared. Gray suit, crisp tie, glossy black briefcase. I stood still on the porch, hands loosely clasped. Lauren smiled, a cut-and-paste smile from a Happy Family commercial. Mom, oh my God, you really live here? It's beautiful, the ocean right behind the house. Tyler didn't smile. He just scanned around, eyes passing over the porch and windows before landing on the wooden sign by the door. Josephine's house. He muttered, almost under his breath, "It's definitely worth it." Neither of them hugged me, no touch, no, "How are you, Mom?" Only eyes measuring in dollar signs. The man stepped onto the porch and held out his hand. "Hello, Mrs. Myers. I'm Victor Hale, your children's attorney." I shook it with just enough pressure. "Attorney?" Lauren cut in, sugar sweet. "Don't misunderstand, Mom. He's here to help organize your paperwork so you can feel secure. You know you forget things, we worry." A shiver ran through me. The way she said, "You forget things," light, natural, as if rehearsed. Victor opened his case and took out a stack of papers. Crisp white sheets, neatly aligned, clipped with a silver binder. "This is a proposal to set up a trust managed by your children. It ensures your assets are protected and no one can take advantage of you. All spending would be co-supervised by them, so you can live here worry-free." I looked him in the eye and asked slowly, "And if I don't agree?" He gave a thin smile in true lawyer fashion. "Oh, that's fine. We're just presenting it. The decision is entirely yours." I glanced at Lauren and Tyler. Lauren avoided my eyes. Tyler stared straight back, cold as stone. I asked, "Where were you when I needed you? When I was sick? When I was abandoned? When I sold my wedding ring to pay Lauren's tuition? When I mortgaged the house to help Tyler open a garage?" No one answered. Only silence and waves hitting the pilings as if underlining every word. I walked slowly to the porch table and pointed at the chairs. "Sit, but I won't be serving tea." Lauren frowned slightly. "Mom, we're just trying to help." I smiled, calm to the point of frightening. "Really? Then sit and help me look at the ceiling." All three followed my gaze. On the ceiling, the security camera glowed green and the mic blinked. Victor blinked and took a half step back. Lauren started to speak, but I cut in. "Yes, that camera records video and audio. Everything you say today will be stored for 90 days in the cloud, auto-backed up every 24 hours. I saw Lauren's hand tremble, and Tyler turn away, hiding his unease under a mocking look. "Camera? You don't trust us, Mom?" I answered softly. "No. I've just learned to trust evidence more than words." The air thickened. Victor cleared his throat and tried to recover his professional tone. "Mrs. Myers, nothing serious. We just want you to feel at ease." I looked at him with a smile as cool as glass. How strange, no one has ever made me more uneasy than someone trying to help me feel at ease. At that moment, a car horn sounded on the road. I recognized the engine. Dean Morales's pickup turned onto the sandy lane. Headlights swept across the porch. At the same time, Maya stepped out of the passenger seat in a long coat, carrying a document case. Lauren jumped to her feet, surprise flashing in her eyes. "Mom, you called a lawyer?" I stayed seated and said, "No, she came because I have an appointment." Dean stepped onto the porch, voice steady. "Is there a problem here, Mrs. Myers?" Victor tried for polite. "Just a civil discussion, officer." Maya opened her case and pulled out a packet. What a coincidence! I brought copies of Mrs. Myers's new will and POAs, notarized and filed with the county court. Just to avoid misunderstandings. I watched both my children's faces change. Tyler frowned and clenched his fist. Lauren tried to smile, but her voice shook. "Why would you do this, Mom?" "We're only afraid someone will trick you," Maya answered for me. "It's wonderful you're concerned, but your mother hasn't been tricked. She's simply done allowing anyone to exploit her." Dean walked a slow circle, casually eyeing the SUV. The license plate caught the afternoon light, another county. He spoke slowly. "If the three of you have no specific purpose beyond a wellness visit, I suggest you leave before dark. The coastal road isn't easy to drive at night." The words were gentle, but it was an order that didn't need repeating. Victor nodded, trying to stay polite. "We'll come back. Later, when Mrs. Myers is ready to talk." "Oh, I'm ready," I said. "I just don't say what you want to hear anymore." They went quiet and gathered their papers. Lauren put a hand to her chest, her voice breaking. "Mom, you've changed so much." I looked her in the eyes. "No. I've just gone back to being myself." As the SUV rolled out the gate, I watched without feeling hurt. Only a light emptiness remained, like after you clear out an old room and realize the wind can finally come in. Maya sat beside me and poured some water. Dean leaned against the porch rail, eyes still on the sea. "You did very well," Maya said softly. I shook my head. "No, they'll be back. My kids don't give up that easily." Maya looked at me, serious. "Then next time, we'll have more evidence." "You're not alone." I looked up at the ceiling. The camera light stayed green, loyal and silent. Outside, the waves hit the shore, steady as the ocean's warning. "The storm isn't over, Josephine. Be ready." And I knew exactly right. The real battle had only just begun. I used to think nothing hurts more than betrayal. But today I understand. Worse than betrayal is when the betrayer still calls you Mom. The next afternoon, just as I expected, the black SUV reappeared. This time there were no smiles, no sugar-coated voices, only the impatience of people trying to close a deal. I opened the door without inviting them in, but they stepped onto the porch as if the place were theirs. Lauren held the same stack of papers, voice trying to stay soft. "Mom, I just want to be clear. This isn't coercion. It's simply a way to make sure you're properly cared for." I leaned on the doorframe. Light off the water lit her hair, but her face darkened with tension. Behind her, Victor Hale, the family attorney they'd hired, had already opened his briefcase, pulled out a new contract, and set it on the porch table like a finely woven net. "I," called Maya. She arrived soon after with her laptop and a look I trusted more than any document. "Let me read first," she said. Victor smiled, smooth as silk. "Go ahead, we're not hiding anything." Maya read quickly. The deeper she got, the more her brow furrowed. I heard her repeat each clause, as if to make sure I needed no further explanation. If the beneficiary, namely Mrs. Josephine Myers, loses decision-making capacity, authority over assets transfers to co-guardians Lauren and Tyler Myers. Expenses for long-term medical care may include selling the primary residence to cover costs, and all actions are deemed lawful so long as they are in the best interest of the ward. The wording was cold as steel, wrapped in pristine paper. Maya looked up, straight at Victor. So if she signs, you can sell this house without her consent simply by labeling it medical expenses. Am I correct? Victor gave a thin smile. Of course, but that would only happen if she's no longer competent. Lauren cut in, sharp. We're just being cautious. This is our inheritance. Mom, you don't need to worry about it. I looked at my daughter. For a second I saw the little girl who once ran through the house to show me her first drawing. Now the woman in front of me talked about inheritance while her mother was still alive. I answered slowly, one word at a time. Money that belongs to me while I'm alive is not inheritance. It's work, blood, and time. And it's still flowing in me. The porch went silent. Only the waves hit the pilings steady, strong, and sure. Victor slipped back into his smooth negotiator's tone. Mrs. Myers, we're not trying to make things hard. Sign. And in return, your children promise to call every week and visit often. It's a win-win. I laughed once hoarse and short like ice clinking in a glass. You're bribing me with affection? Trading a few phone calls for my right to be a person? Victor hesitated, and Lauren lowered her head to avoid my eyes. Dean, still by the window, tracking every move, spoke in a calm, firm voice. Mrs. Josephine Myers is the lawful owner of this home. I've checked the county land records. Any attempt to coerce, threaten, or trick her into signing falls under elder protection violations. And I should note, this entire conversation is being recorded on camera. Victor's expression shifted, then he forced himself to stay composed. No one's coercing anyone, we're just concerned. Tyler shot to his feet, growling. Mom's not in her right mind if she thinks this is okay. Who hides money in a house from her own kids? We just want to manage it so she doesn't have to worry. I looked at my son, eyes bloodshot, not from love but from anger. I pulled the cognitive assessment from Dr. Feld out of my bag and held it out to him. Here. Dr. Howard Feld, geriatric specialist, signed. Results. Good cognition, independent reasoning, no signs of decline. If you still doubt me, I'll test again, but this time you come with me, so we can see who's more blind. Tyler crushed the paper in his fist, face reddening. Lauren tugged his sleeve, whispering, Stop! He yanked away and slammed the paper onto the table. Fine, play it your way. But don't think we'll stand by forever. I looked at Victor, who quietly tucked the contract back into his case, eyes cold and calculating. He knew he couldn't win today, but that look, part arrogance, part warning, said this fight wasn't over. Before leaving, Lauren turned back. Do you really want to cut us off, Mom? I answered softly, without a trace of anger. No, I just want to cut off anyone who treats me like a walking wallet. Lauren bit her lip and turned away. The black SUV backed out, tires grinding through the sand, leaving deep, crooked ruts like torn promises. When they were finally gone, I stood on the porch and listened to wind whistle through the cracks. The sky shifted to dusk, half light, half dark, the same conflicted color as the kinship laid bare before me. Maya packed the documents, sliding their contract into an evidence envelope. Do you want me to file this with the court now? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. They'll be back, and next time we need them to reveal everything themselves. Maya nodded, understanding. Dean stepped closer, voice low. You did well, but I'm afraid next time they won't come with just paperwork. I looked at him and smiled wryly. Then I won't have just paperwork either. He smiled, tilting his head. You really are a woman of strategy. After they left, I locked the door and drew the curtains. The house went quiet, only wind thudding against the window frame. I poured a glass of water and sat, hands wrapped around it for warmth. I looked around the wall clock, the little cactus, the lamp glow on a black and white photo of me when I was young. Everything was calm, only my heart still trembled, not from fear, but from the sorrow of seeing the truth stripped bare. "Conditional family," I murmured, the words falling into the air like a cruel definition. I once believed love was unconditional. But today I saw clearly. For many, family lasts only until they get their signature on your assets. I set the glass down. My hands still shook a little. Not from weakness, but the last tremor of someone slipping free of fear. I opened my laptop and backed up the footage into the folder. If there's a case. New file name. Trust. Fraud. Recording. 1. MP. 4. I attached a note with the date, time, and attendees. A small but sturdy system like a fence I built around my heart. Outside, the wind rose. Waves pounded the shore, white and relentless. I looked out the window and said quietly, "Peace isn't the absence of storms, it's learning to stand steady in them." I smiled, then lifted the stated, "Water replacing tremor, replacing prayer. Thank you for letting me not sign today." A month after the day I refused to sign, I thought things had settled. But peace, so I learned, is never a free gift. It's envied, especially by those who share your blood. That morning, while I was watering the porch flowers, the mailman stopped. He joked with a smile, "Looks like you're famous, Mrs. Myers, court mail addressed just to you." I couldn't smile back. A chill ran down my spine when I saw the thick envelope stamped by the street. Johns County Court. I carried it inside, sat at the table, letter opener shaking in my hand, white paper, black print. Neat, cold, petition to declare incapacity and appoint legal guardians, Lauren Myers and Tyler Myers. I read it twice. Every word thudded against my heart. My children didn't just want the assets. They wanted to strip me of personhood. I picked up the phone and called Maya. Her voice came quick and firm. "Don't panic, Miss Josephine. We won't play defense, we'll counterattack." That afternoon, Maya came over. She didn't wear her usual black suit, just a white blouse and hair in a neat bun. On the table, a new stack of files. Copy of the petition. Notice of hearing. Hearing date, the 12th of next month. She set a hand on the file, calm voice, eyes bright as flame. "We won't wait to be interrogated. We'll prove you're fully competent and that the ones claiming to care for Mom are angling for her property." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Where do we start, Maya?" She pulled a notebook and read quickly. "We need witnesses, medical records, and social proof. I'll make a list." Then she wrote, clear line by clear line. 1. Denise Harper, the realtor, confirming the home purchase was entirely lawful and you decided every detail yourself. 2. Deputy Sheriff Dean Morales, witness to pressure and threats from the children. 3. Dr. Howard Feld, cognitive assessment proving no decline. 4. Dr. Naomi Price, therapy report confirming full emotional stability. The home purchase was a proactive, healthy decision. 5. Former neighbors, to testify that the children neglected their mother for years. I looked at the list and felt a little lighter. It wasn't a one-woman fight anymore. 3 days later, I met Dr. Feld again. He greeted me with a kind smile. Maya told me about the suit. "Don't worry, we'll do this by the book." This time he ordered the full battery: short-term memory, verbal response, reasoning, reaction time, spatial awareness. 2 hours of focused work. When we finished, he peered over his glasses. "Miss Josephine, I see many people your age, but few keep this level of sharpness." "I'll sign the statement. No signs of cognitive decline." I thanked him and shook his hand, as if reclaiming a piece of dignity. It wasn't just a medical form, it was an ID card for my self-trust. The next day, I saw Dr. Naomi Price. Same office, mint scent, a seascape across from the chairs. I told her about the petition. She shook her head. There's a name for what you're going through. Gaslighting of the elderly. When family tries to make a senior doubt her own memory. I gave a dry chuckle. My grandchild would call that modern family care. She laughed, then turned serious. I'll write the report. You're fully stable, fully capable, and your actions buying a home, planning, installing security are proactive decisions, not outside influence. I nodded, knowing that report would be the softest, sharpest weapon. That night at home, I stood before the mirror. A 67-year-old woman stared back, no makeup, but steady eyes. Maya had advised, "You need to rehearse answers to their lawyers' questions. No emotion, no arguing. Each answer one breath long. Cut out words they can twist." I practiced, "Mrs. Myers, do you remember how much you transferred? To your son?" "I remember each amount, and I have the statements." "Did you ever forget to pay a bill?" "No. All payments are automatic. I set them up." "Do you ever feel disoriented or lose track of time?" "No. I keep a daily journal with exact dates, over and over, until my voice stopped shaking like relearning the native language of reason." In the last week before the hearing, Maya taught me body language. Shoulders back, eyes steady. When attacked, don't respond immediately. Pause 2 seconds, breathe, then answer. If they start yelling, turn to the court and say, "I'll wait until they're calm." She also taught me to rest my hands lightly on the table instead of clenching, to show control. People won't just hear what you say. They'll watch how you exist. I smiled. "You're training me like an actor," Maya replied. "No. I'm teaching you to keep control in the very room where they want to take it away." In the final evenings, I compiled evidence. I printed a 2-year timeline. Calls and texts from them. Only 7. Calls, texts, and transfers from me. Over 200. I clipped them into a blue binder labeled Evidence of Neglect and Financial Abuse. Looking at those numbers, I saw one truth. Real love never needs proof. Exploitation always leaves a trail. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep right away. I sat on the porch and watched the sea. The water wasn't calm, windy, whitecaps everywhere. I said to myself, tomorrow I won't be a victim. I may be the respondent, but I'm not weak. I'm standing up for my right to decide. I listened to the waves like my own heartbeat. Each surge and fall patient, persistent. I closed my eyes and breathed until fear dissolved like salt in water. Next morning, I woke early. Dawn was still gray. I chose a light gray blouse, soft slacks, flat shoes the color of sand. No jewelry, no necklace, no expensive watch, just a small clip to hold my hair. I wanted to enter the courthouse as myself, unarmored, but unbowed. Before leaving, I paused to look around walls, windows, stripes of light through the curtains. I whispered, "Don't worry, little house. I'll protect you and myself." Then I shut the door. The lock clicked small sound, but it rang like an oath. Dean waited by the car. Maya sat up front with the case on her lap, eyes intent. "Ready?" she asked. I smiled and fastened my seatbelt. Yes. Time to learn the art of being a defendant without lowering my head. The car rolled slowly along the coastal road. The sun edged up behind the palms, light flaring in the rearview mirror. I saw my face there, old but bright, tired but proud. Waves thumped in the distance, singing a quiet encouragement. "Go, Josephine. This time, don't be afraid. You're headed toward your own justice." The street? Johns County courtroom wasn't large, but the air was cold enough that I clasped my hands for warmth. Cream-colored walls, dark benches, and light pouring from high windows made the room solemn and heavy, as if every breath could be recorded. I sat at the defense table beside Maya. She opened the file and nodded to steady me. "Stay calm. Today belongs to the truth," I answered with a small smile, though my heart pounded like surf before a storm. Across the aisle, Lauren and Tyler sat at the plaintiff's table in dark clothes. In front of them sat Victor Hale, the family attorney, with the calm face of a man too used to putting lipstick on lies. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The hearing began. Victor opened, voice precise and sharp like a freshly honed blade. "Your Honor, my client's two devoted children only want to protect their mother. But Mrs. Josephine Myers has acted impulsively, irrationally, and shows severe self-isolation. She liquidated old assets, cut off contact with her children, and handed financial authority to an outsider, a young lawyer she barely knows. We believe she can no longer make reasonable decisions." Each word, impulsive, irrational, unreasonable, was a pebble thrown at my face. I looked down. My hands lay calm on my lap, knuckles white. Victor went on. "Evidence shows that over the past year, she refused to see her children, kept no contact, and displayed troubling behavior installing cameras throughout the home, hiring a personal legal advisor, and recording family members. In our view, these actions stem from a victimization delusion, not sound judgment." Maya didn't interrupt. She waited. And when he finished, she stood, her voice light but clear. "Your Honor, we request to play the video evidence." The judge nodded. Maya signaled the technician. The large screen lit up with the first clip. It was Mother's Day last year. Me in my old kitchen setting 2 bowls of soup, a small mousse cake, and a card still unsigned. Maya spoke evenly. "Your Honor, this was Mother's Day. Mrs. Josephine prepared lunch for her children. The table is empty." And on social media, her daughter posted a photo with the caption, "She zoomed in, with the people who matter most." Silence fell over the room. Lauren lowered her head, face still trying to stay cold. Maya said quietly, "A mother, self-isolating, or abandoned?" She clicked to the next slide. The screen showed 1 year of call and text logs, 4 calls from Lauren, 3 from Tyler, hundreds of unanswered calls and texts from me. "These are their contact frequencies," Maya said evenly. "Who cut off whom?" Victor leaned forward to object. "The court can't judge capacity on personal feelings." "Exactly," Maya replied, eyes flashing. "So we'll let the facts speak." She played the next video. "The confrontation at my house the day Victor, Lauren, and Tyler came demanding I sign the trust." In the clip, Victor's voice rang, "Out, sign it, and in return, your kids promise to call every week." And Lauren's voice wavered, "That's our inheritance money." The courtroom seemed to freeze. I heard my heartbeat pounding in my chest, then looked at Maya. She gave a small nod. She turned to me and signaled. I stood and walked slowly to the witness stand. The light from above was cold and white. My voice was low but steady. "I didn't buy this house to run away. I bought it so I wouldn't be invisible anymore. All my life, I gave to them time, money, love. And when I had nothing left to give, I became a burden. I bought that house to live again, as a person with the right to exist." I paused and looked straight at my 2 children. Both Lauren and Tyler avoided my eyes. Maya called Dr. Howard Feld to the stand. He's nearly 10 years older than me, with the gravelly voice of someone who speaks slowly but surely. I evaluated Mrs. Myers twice within 3 months. Both times showed completely normal cognition, logical thinking, good reaction time, and solid problem solving. There is no medical evidence whatsoever that she lacks capacity. Victor tried to press him, But could she have a mild psychological issue, like anxiety or a delusional belief? Doctor? Feld answered immediately. No. I conducted the evaluation myself. She's clearer than most of her relatives. A soft ripple of laughter went through the room. The judge tapped the gavel. Order. Next was Dr. Naomi Price. She entered with a gentle presence, but her voice could quiet the entire room. Mrs. Josephine Myers came to me to learn how to say no to unreasonable demands. No one is mentally ill just because they want to protect themselves. On the contrary, that's a sign of emotional recovery. Maya smiled, then motioned for the next witness, Denise Harper, the real estate agent. In a light blue suit with her hair pulled back, she spoke clearly. I handled Mrs. Myers's home purchase. She reviewed every detail: foundation, electrical, property taxes, insurance, maintenance fees. There was no sign of confusion or impulsivity. Every decision was carefully considered, and she signed only after reading each clause. Finally, Deputy Sheriff Dean Morales took the stand. In uniform, he moved slowly but with authority. During my role as witness and security support, I found no sign of fraud. What I did observe was psychological pressure from the two adult children, including threats, insults, and attempts to force a signature. Victor sat silent, gripping his pen. Lauren exhaled hard, and Tyler kept his head down, avoiding the judge's eyes. Maya rose, closed the file, and her voice rolled out steady, each word as clear as waves breaking on rock. Your Honor, this is not the story of a frail, confused mother. This is the story of an older woman reclaiming her autonomy, and of children trying to use the law to launder their greed. I don't need many words, only to invite the court to look at the screen and ask, who actually needs protection? The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned back, his eyes deep and calm. He tapped the gavel lightly, then said, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court concludes there is no basis to declare Mrs. Josephine Myers incapacitated. On the contrary, the plaintiff's conduct shows signs of attempting to exploit an elderly person's property. The petition is denied. The plaintiffs will pay all court costs and are warned that continued harassment may result in criminal charges. The room erupted into a hush. Lauren's breathing turned shallow, Tyler slammed his hand on the table, and Victor bowed his head while hurriedly packing his files. Maya touched my shoulder and whispered, "It's done." I stood, bowed to the judge, and turned to leave. My steps were slow but steady. Sunlight flooded the hallway, washing over my hands still trembling, but now from relief. In my mind's eye, I could still see the Mother's Day table, the empty table. But now I knew. Even if no one sits with me, I can still eat in peace. When I stepped out of the courthouse, I lifted my head. Sunlight spilled across my hair and laid a warm weight on my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt a lifetime's heaviness slide off. Not because I'd won the case, but because I was no longer treated as someone who had to prove she was sane enough to live. Wind blew in from the sea, carrying salt and sap, the scent I call the true smell of freedom. Maya came to me and held me tight. Her voice was small but firm. "Miss Josephine, you chose yourself, and the law stood by you." I didn't answer right away. I just squeezed her hand. Some victories don't need cheering, only a deep breath that tells you no one can shove you out of your own life anymore. Dean waited by the gate with a gentle smile. "Told you. You're too strong for the waves to swallow. Just keep going." I thanked him, then turned toward the sea where sunlight melted into water, glittering like 1,000 tiny hands patting the earth in applause. That evening, I sat on the porch. The sea breeze was salty, threading through my hair, my collar, and my spirit. Moonlight blinked across the water like shards of broken mirrors, quietly beautiful. I put the case file in a drawer and took out a blank sheet of paper. I wrote the first line, "To myself, the one who stood up when others wanted to kneel." I didn't write much. Just a few simple sentences. Thank you for believing in yourself, even when people called you crazy. Thank you for saying no, even while your heart still wanted to be loved. Thank you for choosing to live, not just exist. I folded the letter and tucked it into the coastal journal. It wasn't a thank you to life, it was gratitude to the strong part of me. The part I once buried under useless apologies. 3 days after the ruling, Lauren texted, "Just a few lines. Mom, can we talk? We only want to settle. If you return the house and withdraw the filings, everything will be fine." I read it without anger, only tired. I closed the phone, set it on the table, and stepped onto the porch. The waves kept coming, the sky stayed blue, and I understood. My silence today was the clearest answer. Not because I hate them, but because I've stopped hoping to be loved on their terms. That night, Tyler called. His voice was sharp, rapid. "You think it's over because you won? I'll tell the papers you're senile, so everyone sees how crazy you really are." I listened to all of it without cutting in. Then I answered calmly, "Thank you for calling, and everything you just said is being saved on my server." I heard a hard inhale on the other end, then the line went dead. I set the phone down, no longer shaking like before. Maya once told me, "When people use threats, it means they've lost real power. Your job is not to hand it back." I smiled. "Exactly. I don't need to win by fear. I only need not to bow." The next morning, I took out a few seed packets Denise had sent, coastal wildflowers that need only sun and wind. I rolled up my sleeves and let my hands sink into the damp sand. The earth was cool, comforting. I planted small clusters along the porch, right by the wooden rail. When the wind blew, grains of sand dusted my cheek, and I didn't brush them away. They reminded me I can still feel the world with skin and breath. That afternoon, I stopped by the fishing village for coffee. The owner grinned. "Want the fisherman's style? Salt coffee, bitter, salty, sweet on the finish." I nodded. The first sip made me wince, but then the salt opened into gentle sweetness. I laughed and said, "Just like life. The salt makes you remember the sweet." He nodded. "That's why coastal folk don't fear bitterness. In the end, every salt water finds its way back to the sea." That night, I slept straight through without dreaming of the empty table. No scraping chairs, no waiting for a doorbell that never rings. Only waves steady and kind as a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of anyone coming back. I saw myself on the sand, arms open to the wind. Freedom, it turns out, looks like the wind unseen, but real wherever it touches. One morning, walking the beach, I met Ruth Ellison, the silver-haired woman I'd noticed a few times. She smiled and asked, "Are you Josephine Myers? I read about your case. I felt like I was reading about myself." I was a little surprised. "The article said your children sued you too, right?" she asked. I nodded. She sighed softly. "Me too. But I never dared go to court. I stayed quiet and lost my house." I took her hand. "I'm so sorry, Ruth. But you know, silence doesn't keep anyone. It only keeps the pain." She gave a sad smile, pale blue eyes on the horizon. "I learned that from you. When I read the ruling, I sat up and cried. I wished I'd had your courage." I squeezed her hand gently. "It's never too late to choose yourself." From then on, we started morning coffees. 2 women, 2 wooden chairs, 1 pot of salt coffee. We sat on my porch, listening to the waves, saying things we'd never dared say. Ruth told me about her old marriage, about a son who left at 20. I told her about the years I thought giving more would make them love me back. We didn't complain, didn't cry. We just talked and sometimes sat quietly together. Once, when I said I still write one thing I'm grateful for each day, Ruth smiled. I write one thing I no longer need. Yesterday I wrote, I don't need to prove I'm a good mother. I laughed. Good one. Then today I'll write, I don't need to apologize for protecting myself. One breezy morning, Ruth said something I'll never forget. The wind was strong, the waves loud, but her voice was clear and warm like a prayer. Peace is an asset, Josephine. And the biggest mistake we women make is signing it over to other people. I sat still. Those words fell into my heart like sand, light, but settling deep. I looked out at the sea where the sun was rising, gilding the waves. Yes, peace is not a prize. It's property. And from now on, I'll hold the title in my own hand, no consigning it, no granting it to anyone, Myers or otherwise. I breathed in. The wind filled my lungs salty and clean. Ruth smiled, lifted her salt, coffee, and clinked cups with me. Congratulations, Josephine. We're still alive, and this time we're living for ourselves. I answered with a trembling but warm voice. Yes. This time I'm not just living, I'm truly free. One early summer morning, just as I set the coffee pot on the porch table, a small envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address, only a scrawl on the front. To Grandma. I knew the better. Handwriting, it was Emma's. My 10-year-old granddaughter. Lauren's child. I sat down, hands shaking a little as I opened it. Inside was a purple sheet, the corner creased twice. Grandma, I miss you. Mom says you're busy, but I saw you in the news. I don't understand everything, I just know you're not bad. When I grow up, I want to be like you, able to say no and still be kind. I love you lots. P.S. Do you still have a cat? I read it over and over, each line like a needle touching the softest part of my heart. It had been so long since I cried this time because I saw myself through a child's eyes. I picked up a pen and wrote back right away. Dear Emma, I miss you too. The sea here is beautiful. Every morning the waves run up to say hello. The waves come and go. But the tide always returns like true love, which finds its way back no matter how far it travels. I want to teach you 3 things about self-respect. 1. Never stay silent when your heart says no. 2. Don't believe anyone who calls you selfish for protecting yourself. 3. When others turn away, stand tall. Your straight back helps your head stay high. I don't have a cat yet, but lots of birds sing on my porch every morning. If you visit, I'll tell you all their names. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it with careful handwriting. For the first time in months, my heart felt calm as the morning sea, no undertow, just light spread across the water. That evening, Ruth, Denise, and I hosted our first Thursday night book circle. We sat around a small round porch table, each with a dog-eared book and a hot cup of tea. Denise chose The Old Man and the Sea, Ruth brought The Color Purple, and I read a short passage from Maya Angelou's journal. When I read, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it, Ruth pressed a hand to her heart. That was written for us. Denise smiled. I think it was written for every generation of women who once let others speak for them. We sat quietly, listening to the waves and the night insects riding the breeze. A little later, Maya the young lawyer stopped by with strawberry tarts. She said, half joking, I'm here to make sure you 3 don't start an anti-lawyer league. We laughed out loud. That sound, I realized, was something I hadn't heard in my own home for a long time. From then on, Thursday book nights became a small ritual. We didn't just read, we told our stories. Each of us was an open book, and the only wall left between us was trust. The next morning, I joined the ocean swimming group for seniors. They call themselves the Morning Tide Swimmers. The first lesson wasn't technique, It was breathing longer instead of worrying. The coach, a 75-year-old woman named Nora, said, "People don't drown because of the waves. They drown because they forget to breathe." I took it to heart. Each time the cold water wrapped around me, I inhaled deep, closed my eyes, and felt my body fall into rhythm with the sea. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the deep. I understood that the more you fight, the more you sink, and the more you accept, the more you float. One afternoon, Dean stopped by. He carried a form and a small packet. "I signed you up for the county's Personal Safety for Seniors program. They'll install an emergency app and give you a portable alarm." I teased, smiling. "So you really see me as a senior now?" Dean grinned gently. "No, I see you as someone smart enough to plan ahead." He set up the app, showed me how to toggle it, and how to send my location if needed. Before leaving, he said, "Peace doesn't always come on its own. You have to fence it in." I nodded. I'd learned that, and this time the fence was made of awareness, not fear. The next day, I made clam chowder and brought it to the neighbors, the Carters, the retired couple who helped me move in. "Mrs. Carter was surprised. "You still remember the Northeastern recipe? Goodness, it smells amazing." We ate together and talked about gardens, rain, and the old days. Before I left, she held my hand. "We need you here, truly. Not many like you in this town." I stopped short. "We need you," the words stung my eyes. For years I'd only heard, "We need you for one more thing," and behind that always came money, labor, or sacrifice. Now, for the first time, someone needed me for me. That night I wrote another letter, this one for forgiveness. I wrote to Lauren, to Tyler, and even to Victor. "I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. It only means I'm no longer carrying you on my back. I didn't send it. I folded it and placed it in the Coastal Journal. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't need a recipient. It just needs the writer willing to let go. The following week, I started a new project, a blog called Coastal Diary at 67. I wrote under my real name. The first post was titled, "Don't Let Anyone Write Your Ending." I told my story, from a mother stripped of control to a woman relearning how to own her breath. No frills, no philosophy, just truth. I didn't expect it to travel so far. Hundreds of comments, most from older folks. I'm 72, and I just said no to my son for the first time. "You made me want to go visit my mother. Thank you for saying what so many of us feel." One morning, someone knocked. A middle-aged woman stood there with a bouquet of lavender. "I'm Emily from the next town," she said, voice tight. "After reading your blog, I went to see my mother, whom I hadn't visited in 2 years. We hugged this morning. Thank you because you reminded me time isn't endless." After she left, I sat down and cried, but not from sorrow. It was the first time I cried because I felt useful. That afternoon, I cleaned a closet and found a spare set of keys. House, safe, back gate. I turned them in my hand, then put them in a small glass jar and labeled it, "Open only when you remember yourself." Not when I forget, but when I remember. Remember how long it took to earn this freedom. I set the jar on a shelf beside an old photo of me and Emma on the beach. 2 faces, one big and one small, both turned to the sea where the waves keep rising, reminding me, anyone can begin again. At any age, no matter the losses. I whispered, a promise to myself. If anyone comes looking for me, they'll find a woman who's living not afraid, not waiting, just breathing. The sea breeze slipped through the window and lifted a note on the table. "Peace is an asset, don't sign it over to anyone." I smiled. Peace, yes, now it looks like me. 2 years passed. I stopped counting by calendars and started counting by the smell of wind, and the brightness of morning. The waves out there keep time like a clock, the only thing in my life that has never missed an appointment. The second year, after the trial, is also the second year. I haven't gotten a single call from Lauren or Tyler. No birthday texts, no Christmas greetings, no Mother's Day card. But the strange thing is, I don't fall apart anymore. No more waiting, no more flinching every time the phone rings. I just smile, turn on the oven, and get ready for my own small party, the birthday I throw for my chosen family. That afternoon, the sea-facing house smelled of cinnamon apple pie. Ruth came early with a pot of mint tea. Denise brought a bundle of dried lavender, and Maya arrived a little late, slightly out of breath. Sorry, court ran long this morning, but I brought wine. We put on jazz, opened the porch doors, and let the wind blow through the house. Dean stopped by too, still in uniform, carrying a small cake with a handwritten line, "For the bravest lady in town." I laughed, my voice catching a little. "If you knew how soft I was 2 years ago, you wouldn't call me that." Dean smiled. Brave doesn't mean never weak, it means weak and still moving. We ate, told stories, and laughed, the sound I once thought I'd never have again. No fancy cake, no noisy toasts, just the smell of baking, the sunset light, and 4 friends around a wooden table. I looked around and suddenly realized, this is the real family, the ones not tied by blood but who never leave. That evening, after everyone left, I cleaned the table. Under a dessert plate, I found a small envelope labeled, "From Emma to Grandma." I froze. The postmark was from an elementary school in another city. I opened it and found a small note, written in neater handwriting than before. "Grandma, Mom didn't let me send a gift this year, so I'm writing in secret. When I'm old enough to decide, I'll come visit you. I still remember the way you told me about starfish, and I drew it on the back. I love you so, so much. Emma." I flipped it over and saw a small drawing, 2 people, one big and one small, lying on the sand, looking up at a sky full of stars. In the corner she'd added, "I believe stars still shine even when you can't see them in the daytime." I pressed the letter to my chest. Tears fell, but they were warm not for what was lost, but for knowing something beautiful still exists somewhere, even if not within reach. The next morning, I wrote back to Emma. "My dear Emma, when you look up, you'll see the stars like little beads of memory. I look at that same sky every night. If you come someday, we'll map the stars so we won't lose each other, no matter where we are. Remember, you can love someone without losing yourself. Love, Grandma." I tucked the letter into a small notebook and marked it with a sprig of dried lavender. When she finds her way to me, I'll give it to her, not as an explanation, but as a map to freedom. A few weeks later, Ruth shared big news. "Josephine, I'm moving out on my own." I looked at her and still saw a little worry in her eyes. "I rented a small place at the end of Ocean View. Not far. But I want to cook the first meal in my own kitchen." I was happy for her. And I knew the feeling, equal parts excitement and tremble, like learning to walk after an accident. I helped her make a safety list. Emergency numbers, the door camera spot, the porch light schedule, and regular health checkups. Ruth smiled, half teasing, half touched. "You know, I once thought I couldn't start over, but watching you, I believe I can." I answered softly. "I thought that too. Until the waves taught me everything can change direction." On moving day, I walked her to the door. That night, like always, I sat on my porch and watched the light from her new place flicker in the distance. A small light, but steady proof that some people arrive late in life, but right on time in your heart. A week later, Denise called with news. "House sold, Joe. The buyer's a widow from Maine, also in her 60s. I told her this neighborhood has good neighbors." I smiled. "Thank you, kind agent." When the woman moved in, we brought a small lavender plant and set it on her porch. She hugged me and whispered, "I used to fear starting alone. But seeing you smile, peace doesn't feel scary anymore." Walking back, Denise said, "Funny how some houses don't just change owners, they change the air." I nodded. Maybe when someone learns to live true, the place they live warms up too. Time passed, and I agreed to teach a small class at the community center. Property rights and personal boundaries for older adults. Maya suggested it. Just tell your story, no heavy law. They need to hear from someone who lived it. At first I refused, afraid my voice would shake. But that first day, facing a dozen silver heads and curious eyes, I took a deep breath and began, "I'm not a lawyer, just someone who nearly lost everything because of the word trust. Trust isn't wrong, what's wrong is trusting without limits. Boundaries don't make us selfish, they make love clean." After class, an elderly man came up and said softly, "Ma'am, I'm going home to talk to my son, not to fight, just to talk." "Thank you." I smiled. If one story helps one person keep their home, then everything I went through was worth it. That night, I opened an old album. Back then, our family photos always missed someone, the photographer, the angry one, the one avoiding the frame. Now, in the living room, I hung a new picture. Me on the wooden porch, a blazing red sunset behind me, holding a cup of salt coffee. No one cropped out, and no one needed to stand beside me to make happiness. That photo, to me, proves a life can mend. I stood before it and whispered, "Peace is a decision, not a circumstance." Outside, the waves rose and fell like the earth's heartbeat. I realized the last big wave of my life isn't loss, it's the return of myself. I inhaled and smiled. If someone asked me what happiness looks like, I'd say, it looks like tonight's sunset, no debts owed, only fullness in your chest. One early morning, before sunlight reached the porch, I opened my laptop, set a cup of tea beside it, and wrote the final opening line for my blog. Love isn't measured by waiting, it's measured by the way we live. I read it 3 times. Simple, but it holds everything I learned in 2 years about loss, about boundaries, about loving without losing yourself. I no longer write the blog to tell stories, but to put a clean period at the end of a journey. At the bottom, I introduced something new. A scholarship in my mother's name, Eleanor's Light, for older women starting over, even if it's just a cooking class, driving lessons, or learning to add upon Eleanor's Light. Use a smartphone. I don't have much money, but enough to start. In the description, I wrote, "My mother's light never glittered, but it was bright enough to guide me out of the fog. Now I just want to pass that light on." When the scholarship paperwork was done, Maya called. Her voice moved. "You know, you didn't just win a case, you changed how people see aging." I laughed. "No, Maya, I just learned to live, not wait." On my front door, I taped a small note in blue ink. Not for sale, not for rent, not negotiating, only coffee. Half joke, half true. Plenty of people have tried to buy my beach house, offering twice the price. Some even pitched turning it into a homestay. I only smiled. This house isn't for business. It's the rest of my heart, and I won't slice it up. Every morning, I brew a pot of coffee, open the porch, and let the aroma ride the sea breeze. People say coffee smells like memory, but to me, it's the scent of freedom chosen. That afternoon, I sat on the porch and listened to the waves. The sound hadn't changed, but I had. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Thank you to the version of me who turned her back on silence." I used to fear the silence between calls that never came. Now I know silence isn't scary, it's only scary when you don't use it to hear yourself. I opened my notebook and wrote on a new page, "If they call someday, I'll open my heart, but with clear boundaries." I can forgive, but I won't trade peace for kinship again. Boundaries, in the end, aren't walls, they're maps that keep us from losing ourselves. That autumn, I turned 69. No flowers, no gifts, just wind and laughter. Dean brought a small plant and said, "It's called Wind's Whisper. It blooms only when the soil is watered steadily and the grower isn't in a hurry." I smiled. Sounds like me, doesn't it? Nearly 70 years to bloom one season of peace. We sat, together without many words. Ruth came with apple tart, and Denise swung by late with fresh-cut lavender. We didn't call it a party, just an ordinary afternoon where everyone could be themselves. That night, I went to the beach. The water reflected the moon, rippling like a silver ribbon. I lit a small candle, set a cup of tea on the porch, and invited the wind in my little ritual of making peace with life. No music, no incense, just wind and salt. I closed my eyes and saw myself clearly, not the mother cut out of the frame, but the person standing in the center of her own picture. Quietly, like a thank you, I said, "Thank you, because I'm still here. And I live." If my story reaches you, maybe it's because you carry a piece of me too, the one who loved hard, endured in silence, and finally learned to stand on her own side. I want to ask, where are you listening from? A small house by a lake? An apartment in the city? Or somewhere you're learning to begin again? Leave a comment and tell me about a time you chose yourself, even if it was just saying no to what was hurting you. If this story helps you, please like and subscribe so more older people can find a way out the way we did. Thank you for your time. I don't know who you are, but I know we just shared the same breath. The breath of people who chose peace over fear. I truly appreciate you. Night fell, and the wind poured into the house with the smell of salt and a strange warmth. I stood, gently closed the blog, and turned off the living room light. By the window, the wind's whisper trembled. The moon still shone, the waves still sang, and I, the woman once labeled incapacitated, now have only one thing left to lose: fear. I sat down, took the last sip of tea, and spoke aloud my farewell to the past. I live. I don't wait.
I never thought my life would collapse because of a car. That morning, I brought a warm batch of waffles to my daughter-in-law's house to surprise her. But the moment I turned into the driveway, I saw the dark blue sedan of Leon, my husband, parked right by Sophie's door. I froze. Leon had said he was going on a business trip hundreds of miles away today. My heart nearly dropped to the ground when I heard his familiar laughter drifting out through the kitchen window, blending with Sophie's sweet, almost sickening voice. I held onto the wall, trying not to fall. Then a sentence from inside made my whole body turn cold. If Aaron finds out, we're finished. In that second, I understood. I was no longer the woman they thought they could easily fool. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like, so it can reach even further. I don't remember how many steps I backed away. I only know the waffles slipped from my hand and fell onto the tiled walkway. That sound, a soft, damp thud, still exploded in my head like thunder. A gift I had made with all my heart lay smashed at my feet, just like my 30-year marriage crumbling piece by piece. I stood there, barely breathing, afraid even the smallest noise would alert them inside. But then I realized they weren't even being cautious. Betrayers always assume the victim is still blind. I turned around, stepping back as if the ground could collapse beneath me at any moment. My hands were ice cold, my heart pounding so fast I thought I might collapse before reaching my car. When I finally got inside, I had to sit still for several minutes just to steady my breathing. Everything inside me felt bent out of shape. I drove home, or rather, the car drove itself, because my mind was completely blank. The traffic lights turned from green to red, then red to green, and I couldn't remember which streets I had passed in the small Oregon town where I had lived for nearly 2 decades. When I walked into the kitchen, I set my purse down on the table, but my hands trembled so hard I had to hold my own wrist. I looked at the family photo hanging on the wall. Me, Leon, our son Aaron, and Sophie. The person I once thought was the daughter I never had. The picture suddenly looked distorted, so much that I had to turn away. I sat in the kitchen for hours, the noon light fading, darkness filling the room, and I didn't even realize time was passing. All I knew was that I had lost something bigger than trust. I had lost the very idea of family. Around nearly 6 in the evening, I heard the door open. Leon came home. He walked in with the familiar, tired look of a middle-class American husband after work. The most sickening part was how perfectly he played that role, almost naturally. He kissed my cheek, and right then I smelled perfume that wasn't mine. A sweet, sharp, floral scent, the kind Sophie always wore. My chest tightened painfully, but I stood still. I didn't pull away, didn't tremble, didn't ask anything. I stayed silent, and that silence made Leon even more at ease. A man who lies often never pays attention to the eyes of the person who truly sees him. Throughout dinner, he talked about a busy business trip that I knew never existed. I watched him lie as easily as breathing, and inside me, the feeling was not rage. It was realization, a cold, clean truth. Only a seasoned liar could stay that calm. I felt as if I had woken up after years of sleep, and the man sitting across from me was suddenly a stranger. I didn't scream, didn't break things, didn't throw suspicions at his face. Instead, the quieter I became, the more I felt myself cracking inside. But that cracking didn't destroy me like I once believed. It was transforming into something else, an icy clarity I never knew I had. That night, when he fell asleep with his steady breathing, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silence in the room felt like a cemetery. I turned to look at the man beside me, and I understood that from the moment I heard the words that morning, "If Aaron finds out," my life had split into 2. One part still lay here beside him under this roof. The other had stepped into a place where truth was the only light I could hold on to. I told myself I had to watch every detail, every change in behavior, every call Leon received, every message Sophie sent me with that artificial sweetness. Instinct, the only weapon a woman my age still has after decades of sacrifice, told me that the affair was only the thin skin covering something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. I no longer saw myself as the victim. I began to sense a small flame, weak but very real, in the deepest corner of my mind, a flame not burning from pain but from resistance, from determination, from the understanding that if I kept surrendering, I would lose everything, not just my dignity, but the rest of my life. And right there in the darkness of that bedroom, where Leon slept peacefully as if no guilt weighed on him, I said to myself, I will not let them lead me by the nose for one more day. The next morning, the house I had lived in for over 20 years suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a temporary shelter. Every familiar sound, the heater switching on, the soft creak of the wooden floor, the coffee maker releasing steam, stabbed at my heart like needles. I sat blankly at the table, the cup before me still full but cold. Sunlight filtered through the curtains I once loved, yet today it made the room look bare, exposing every crack inside me. When I stood up to reach for a pan, memories of Leon's last-minute business trips surfaced. All those nights he came home late, saying he was stuck in meetings, stuck in traffic, or having dinner with clients. I had believed him because trust had become a habit for a wife who had grown too used to sacrificing. But now, with everything broken, I looked back and saw the holes everywhere. It felt like walking backward into the past, touching each memory and realizing it had been rotten for years without me admitting it. Thinking of Aaron, the child I loved more than anything, my heart twisted. Aaron always respected his father, believed Leon was the most admirable man alive. My son had no idea that the dinners he remembered as Dad working late could have been nothing but excuses. I couldn't imagine how deeply it would hurt him if he learned the truth. And that fear for Aaron was what kept me standing when all I wanted was to fall apart. I tried to make breakfast as usual, desperate to hold on to some sense of normalcy, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. I dropped the knife, spilled the milk, cracked eggs onto the stovetop. I cleaned everything quietly, unwilling to let Leon see me shaking. The bitter truth was that I didn't even recognize the woman I was becoming inside my own home. When Leon walked into the kitchen, he greeted me with a gentle smile and asked, "Did you sleep well?" His voice was natural and relaxed, so much that it chilled me. How could he go from Sophie's bed yesterday to my table this morning without skipping a beat? I looked at him without responding, and a slow burn of anger rose in me. Not because he betrayed me, but because he thought I would never find out. Leon sipped his coffee, opened the newspaper, chatted about the weather, as if our life had no cracks. His calmness made me want to withdraw even more. I didn't understand how I had ever loved this man, but then I reminded myself I needed to observe. I needed to remember every detail. This wasn't a marriage anymore, it was a battleground. After breakfast, once Leon left the house, I took a new notebook and began recording everything. The time he left, the time he came home, unfamiliar transactions on the bank statement, odd purchases, every subtle shift in his tone, the way he now kept his phone locked. Each line was a stab to the heart, but each line also strengthened my armor. The pain slowly turned into clarity, a sharp, cold clarity, not fueled by revenge, but by survival. I spent the whole morning rechecking receipts I normally ignored because I believed Leon handled everything. And that was when I found a hotel bill, booked under a company name I had never heard of. There was no reason for Leon to book a hotel room in the very city we lived in. I knew I had just touched the surface of something bigger. Before I could gather my breath, my phone buzzed with a message. It was Sophie. "Mom, are you feeling well this morning? I'd love to visit you soon. I miss you so much." I read each word, and my throat felt scorched. Sophie had never sent affectionate messages like this. That overly sweet tone only appeared when someone was hiding something ugly. I replied politely but curtly. I wanted to see how she reacted. Another message followed. "I just want to be sure you're not upset. You know I've always loved you." I set the phone down and stared at it, as if the small device could answer all of Sophie's secrets. Her message wasn't concern, it was a probe. She wanted to know whether I had heard anything yesterday, whether I suspected anything. And at that moment, a terrifyingly clear truth surfaced. Leon and Sophie were not only betraying love, marriage, and morality. They were hiding something bigger, something that could hurt not just me, but Aaron, something that needed to be exposed. I looked around the house, once our safe haven, our stability, our warmth. But now every corner was shadowed by the sentence I overheard through that window. "If Aaron finds out, we're finished." Those weren't the words of two people having an affair. They were the words of people hiding a crime. I took a deep breath, placed my hand on the notebook, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was waking up from a long, deceitful sleep. I knew what I had to do. From morning until late afternoon, one image kept replaying in my mind: the door to Leon's study. It was always locked. In all our years of marriage, I had never stepped inside without permission. Leon always said it was his private office, a place where he needed quiet for his projects. I had believed him, because trusting him had been my default as a wife. But now, that door felt like it was suffocating me. Every time I passed it, I felt as if something inside was knocking, whispering that the truth was in there, truth Leon wanted to bury. Late that afternoon, as I changed the bed sheets, I suddenly remembered an old wooden jewelry box, Leon's first birthday gift to me after we married. I hadn't opened it in years. I walked into the bedroom, pulled the box from the drawer, and lifted the lid. The soft scent of old wood drifted up, a scent from a time when I had trusted Leon completely. In the corner of the box, beneath the green velvet lining, was a small brass key. I froze. I recognized it immediately. Years ago, Leon had given me a spare key to his study, in case he forgot. Later, he said he no longer needed me to keep it, and I forgot it existed. But the key had been here all along, untouched, waiting. I picked it up. The cold metal spread across my palm. It wasn't fear. It was confirmation that my instincts had been right. That evening, Leon came home late again. He claimed he had a meeting with a client. I watched him lie without a blink, maintaining my calm exterior. That calmness, I realized, was exactly what made him believe I was still the same trusting wife. Around 11, Leon fell asleep quickly. I sat up in bed, waited until his breathing settled, then stepped out quietly. The dim hallway light stretched my shadow long and thin across the wall. I walked to the study door, holding the key tightly. I inserted it into the lock and turned it. A small click, and the door opened. The room glowed faintly from the lamp Leon always left on. Papers, files, and his laptop were scattered across the desk. I approached slowly, heart pounding but hands steady. File after file made no sense until I reached the thin folder with the line, "Transfer to Sophie Doyle. Account ending in 4827. My knees nearly buckled. I kept reading. Then I found the printed email. "Make the transfer before Aaron notices. I'll double check after the meeting." Leon's signature sat beneath it. I read it again and again, my eyes burning. This wasn't just adultery. This was theft. They were stealing from Aaron, our son. I photographed everything, every file, every email, every signature. With each photo, something inside me broke. But with each photo, another part of me came alive, stronger, sharper. When I closed the door behind me, I whispered to myself, I need a good lawyer, and I will find one. That was the first night in decades that I felt I was finally standing on my own side, and I knew I would not turn back. The next morning, I barely slept, not from fear, but from clarity. The documents and screenshots replayed in my mind like cold sparks. I knew I couldn't face this battle alone. A 62-year-old woman, after 3 decades of trusting blindly, could not single-handedly fight the schemes Leon and Sophie had built. I needed an ally. Daniel Porter came to mind, the attorney downtown, known for handling complicated divorce cases. People said he was calm, sharp, and never quick to judge. I called at 8 in the morning. He answered with steady confidence. 11 a.m. You can come in. and that voice felt like an anchor thrown into the rough sea I'd been drowning in. Daniel's office was inside an old red brick building, the glass door spotless, the interior simply arranged. Tall bookshelves, a few landscape paintings, a wall clock ticking steadily. The space smelled of wood and paper, the kind of scent that made you feel as if you were about to reorganize your life on a clearer, more orderly surface. When I stepped in, Daniel stood up to shake my hand. He was in his early 40s with lightly graying hair, bright but warm eyes, and steady hands that were firm without being rough. He didn't smile much, but the look in his eyes made me feel I wasn't being judged, even though I had come there with a heart full of torn edges. "Mrs. Doyle, please have a seat," he said. I sat down, my hands instinctively clasping each other beneath the desk. Daniel didn't rush me, didn't interrupt. He only nodded slightly as I began telling the story. The morning I brought waffles to Sophie, Leon's car, the laughter drifting through the window, the sentence that shattered me. Then I told him about searching through the files, the transfers, the email about before Aaron finds out, and how I photographed everything as if it were a survival reflex. Every word I spoke felt like a needle stitching back the torn pieces inside me. But Daniel only listened. No startled expressions, no rapid-fire questions. He let me talk until my breathing slowed. After I finished, Daniel laced his fingers together on the table. "Do you have evidence?" he asked. The question was gentle, direct, and necessary. I opened my purse and took out my phone. The screen lit up, showing the photos I had taken the night before. Daniel leaned in, examining each one. His eyes didn't change, but something in his demeanor sharpened, became more focused. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Doyle," he said slowly, "what I see here is not just infidelity. This is evidence of financial misconduct. If that account belongs to Sophie and the funds were transferred from a shared source connected to your son's company, then this matter may be reviewed by both family court and economic court." I tightened my hands. I suspected as much, but hearing someone who understood the law confirm it made me feel pain and relief at the same time. "I want a divorce," I said, "and I want to protect Aaron. I cannot allow those two to hurt my son for even one more minute." Daniel nodded, not surprised. He pulled a folder from the drawer and set it in front of me. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." He looked at me for a moment as if assessing the resolve in my eyes. Then he said, "Then, the first thing you must do is stay quiet." I tilted my head slightly. Daniel explained, his tone even but firm. "If Leon or Sophie senses that you know the truth, they'll erase the trail. They may have already started, and if they see you anxious, they'll tighten their defenses. But if you remain silent, they'll keep behaving as usual, and their usual behavior leaves evidence." I felt the truth of his words. Last night, standing in the hallway outside Leon's secretive study, I had sensed that this wasn't a battle of emotions. This was a battle of strategy. "You keep observing," Daniel said. "Document everything. Collect everything. Don't confront them. Don't question them. The quieter you are, the more they reveal who they truly are." That last sentence sent a shiver down my back. It wasn't comfort. It was strategy. When I left Daniel's office, the sky was softly gray, the wind cool as it passed through the row of trees along the street. But my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I no longer felt like a betrayed wife stumbling around in her own home. I felt like someone standing on a high ridge, seeing the road ahead clearly, still rocky, but one I had to walk. When I returned home, everything inside me felt different. No more panic, no trembling. A strange calm wrapped around me, the kind of calm a person feels only when she realizes she has nothing left to lose except the truth. Leon was in the living room watching TV. He looked at me as I walked in, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for something. Maybe he sensed a change. My silence was not the same as before, no longer soft, but edged. Yet I didn't speak. I simply gave him a faint smile and walked past him as though nothing had happened. That calmness made Leon hesitate. He didn't understand it, but that only reassured me that I was on the right path. From that day on, I began to play the role of the perfect wife. I cooked the dishes Leon liked, asked him about work, even made his morning coffee exactly the way he preferred. I spoke just enough not to raise suspicion and stayed quiet just enough to observe. Not to save the marriage, but to protect my plan. And the more I watched, the more I saw Leon revealing glaring cracks. Calls he hung up on quickly when I entered the room, late returns home with vague explanations, the uneasy look in his eyes when he received certain messages. Each of those actions was like an ink mark on the map of wrongdoing I was gradually sketching. On Sunday night, as I was cleaning the kitchen, Daniel texted, "The longer you stay silent, the more they expose themselves. Don't forget that." I read the message like a vow I needed to carve into my heart, not for revenge, but to protect myself, protect Aaron, protect the life I built with my own hands. I put the phone away and looked around the familiar kitchen, the heart of my former family, and I quietly told myself, I've begun, and I will not stop. After meeting with Daniel, I entered an entirely new phase, a place where every breath, every word, every glance could become a clue. I began observing Leon and Sophie not with the emotions of a wife or a mother, but with the clarity of someone reconstructing a picture of wrongdoing. At family gatherings on weekends, I watched every glance they exchanged. Sophie kept her head down over her coffee longer than usual whenever Leon got up for more sugar. Leon talked about work with a tone light as air, but Sophie followed each of his words with her eyes, like someone making sure her accomplice didn't slip. Every tiny detail showed me how blind I had once been. I began noticing the way Sophie looked at me, not with the warm friendliness of the woman who once hugged me every Thanksgiving. Now her eyes were tight, cautious, as if one wrong word from me would bring everything crashing down. Sophie avoided being alone with me, always finding excuses to step away, to call a friend, water a plant, check a recipe, but I could tell she was simply avoiding risk. As for Leon, he believed he was subtle, but no one can hide the shift in their routine when they're preparing to do something illegal. The late-night work calls became more frequent, and each time Leon stepped into the backyard or the garage to talk, he carried his phone like a prison key, never out of reach. One night, Leon stepped outside for a call, leaving the door slightly cracked. Through that gap, I heard the sentence that chilled my blood. "Push that amount out before Friday. I don't want this dragging on." His voice was low and firm, not at all like the weary tone he used in front of me. I stood at the staircase, gripping the railing, realizing the documents I found were only the surface. Beneath it was a whole stream of money being shifted quietly from Aaron's company into Leon's and Sophie's pockets. I began to act even more carefully. When Leon left the house in the morning, I stood in his study for a moment, looking around like someone learning to read the silent language of lifeless objects. Unsealed envelopes, slightly misaligned folders, a journal with one corner sticking out. Everything became a code I needed to decipher. One afternoon, after Leon went out to meet a client, I installed an automatic recording program on his computer. I knew the line between ethics and survival was thin, but if I didn't act, the truth would disappear forever into the hands of two people who were cheating and breaking the law. The next day, when I opened the recording, I heard papers rustling, keyboard tapping, and then Leon's voice clear as day. The final big transfer needs to go out this week. Don't let Aaron check the balance. I stopped the playback immediately, my palm cold and damp. I had been right. This wasn't just betrayal in the shadows. This was theft. This was destroying my son's future. From that moment on, my marriage became an intricate performance. I was the main actress, burying every real emotion beneath a gentle, calm mask. Leon acted more affectionate, as if trying to cover something. But I knew he wasn't doing it out of love. He was doing it to control what I might know. I let him play the role of the kind husband while I played the naive wife who suspected nothing. One evening, I saw a few documents Leon had left on the dining table. I hadn't planned to touch them, but when I glanced down, I saw the signature line under Joint Account Holder. It was my name. The signature looked exactly like mine, but I had never signed it. A chill ran down my spine. Leon had used my name to legitimize certain financial documents. Not once, likely many times. He had forged my signature, something I thought happened only in the news, never in my own home. I said nothing. I couldn't. Everything inside me swirled like a storm, but outwardly, I was calm, so calm that I scared myself. I simply photographed the document and put my phone away as if nothing had happened. When I had enough evidence, I emailed Daniel. I have more evidence. I will bring it to your office tomorrow morning. Daniel replied with just 3 words, "Keep going." Perhaps it was that brevity that steadied me. He knew exactly what I was facing and what I needed most: resolve. That night, while washing dishes, listening to the steady stream of water, I heard an envelope slide through the front door slot. No mail carrier, no knock. I wiped my hands with a towel and picked up the envelope. The handwriting on the front was so familiar, it made my chest tighten. Dear Mother Margaret, I feel like we haven't talked in a while. I miss you so much. Sophie. I opened the letter. Lines of gentle, overly affectionate handwriting filled the page. She mentioned times we cooked together, holiday decorations I gave her, words of encouragement I'd offered when she was going through something. She wrote that she could sense I was sad and wanted me to know I always had her. I folded the letter. Too sweet, too flattering. Panic disguised as tenderness. In that moment, I understood. They were starting to fear me. People only perform when they're not afraid, but when they start to tremble, they write letters, flatter, recall memories that aren't truly shared. I placed the letter with the other collected evidence. Each piece was a brick in the road leading to the truth, and I knew I was walking that road correctly. I looked around the house, once a haven of peace, now a stage for lies. And at the center of that stage was me, a reluctant actress who was slowly mastering her role, a role whose ending would not be applause, but light that would expose everything Leon and Sophie were trying to bury. The day I signed the divorce papers, the sky was gray but dry. The sky felt like a blank page waiting for someone to write on it. I sat in Daniel's office, a stack of thick legal papers in front of me. Cold, emotionless words listing my name, Leon's name, our wedding date, years of marriage, assets, responsibilities, all condensed into a few pages. "Read it once more, just to be sure," Daniel said evenly. I read slowly, Each line felt like scissors cutting the invisible rope that had bound me to this marriage for 30 years. I didn't cry. In truth, my tears had dried the morning I saw Leon's car at Sophie's house. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked. I lifted my head and looked at him. "If I don't do this now," I whispered, "when will I ever have the courage to live the rest of my life?" Daniel nodded without comment. He slid the papers toward me and pointed to the signature line. I looked at the printed name, Margaret L. Doyle. For a moment, I thought of the young woman decades ago who signed her name at City Hall to get married. The same name. But the woman today was not the woman back then. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. The ink glided smoothly. When I finished, I set the pen down and heard a soft click on the wooden desk. A very small sound, but inside me, it echoed like a lock turning for the final time. "It's done," Daniel said. "From now on, leave the rest to me." I sat still for a moment, letting the truth settle in. "When will he know?" I asked. "As soon as the court receives the documents and sends the official notice," Daniel replied. "Within a day or two, maybe sooner." I nodded. Part of me wanted to run from everything, hide beside the ocean, pretend I had never seen those filthy records. But the stronger part told me, I have come this far. Turning back is not an option. On the way home, I pulled over on a quiet street while waiting for a red light. A strange feeling spread through my chest, light and painful at the same time, as if I had cut out a tumor that had grown deep inside me. It used to be part of my body, but it had also been killing me slowly. That afternoon, near 6 in the evening, the landline phone in the kitchen rang. The old kind of phone I kept out of habit, even though everyone used cell phones now. I was washing dishes, my hands covered in soap, but instinct told me I needed to answer. "Hello?" I said. There was a beat of silence. Then Leon's voice came through, tense and dry. "Margaret, what is happening?" His voice was no longer calm like usual, no longer the voice of a husband coming home asking his wife what was for dinner. I could hear his rushed breathing, the faint sound of someone speaking in the background at his office, and I understood. He had just gotten the call from the court. "The court called me," Leon continued. "You filed for divorce? Is this some kind of joke?" I turned off the faucet, wiped my hands, and leaned against the kitchen cabinet. "No," I said, my voice so steady it surprised even me. "It's not a joke." "What's going on with you? What's wrong, Margaret?" He lowered his voice, trying to sound concerned. "What did I do that made you—" "Leon," I cut in, soft but firm. "You know exactly what." Silence fell on the other end, as if someone had snatched the script right out of his hands. The pause stretched so long I could hear the hum of the air conditioner behind me. Then Leon changed his tone. "If you're upset about something, we can talk. 30 years. You're throwing everything away over a moment of anger?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "It's not over a moment of anger," I answered. "It's because I spent 30 years trusting the wrong person." I set the phone down before he could say more. My hands no longer trembled. My heart pounded hard, but it wasn't fear. It was the heartbeat of someone who had finally made a decision she had hesitated over for far too long. Not 20 minutes later, my cell phone rang. Sophie's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds, then answered. I wanted to see what role she would play this time. "Mom?" Sophie's voice cracked, as if she were crying. "I just heard. What are you doing? This is a misunderstanding, it has to be." I didn't respond immediately. On the other end, she kept going. "Leon said the court called him. that you filed for divorce. You can't do something like that without talking to us first. Are you okay? Say something. I'm worried about you." Her voice was soft, drawn out, full of concern. 2 years ago, my heart might have melted. But now, every word only reminded me of all the times Sophie smiled at me across the dinner table, while almost certainly texting Leon messages I was never meant to see. "I'm fine," I said, deliberately using I instead of Mom. Sophie froze. A small shift in how I addressed myself was enough to make her lose balance. Margaret, why would you—" I didn't let her finish her performance. "Sophie," I said, my voice smooth as glass, "I don't want to talk right now. If there's anything related to procedures, my lawyer will respond. And if it truly is a misunderstanding, like you said, then let the court confirm that. But, Mom," I ended the call. My fingertip tapped the screen lightly, a simple touch that cut straight through an entire act. Less than a minute later, a message came in. No more Mom. No more "I'm worried about you." No more softness. What the hell do you think you're doing? Do you know how this will affect Aaron? Are you trying to ruin everything? I stared at the text, feeling my chest grow cold, not from the insult, but from the fact that, finally, the mask had fallen. A second text arrived so fast I knew she had rehearsed it in her head already. "If you drag this into court, a lot of things are going to come out, not just ours, yours too. Are you sure you want everything dug up?" I inhaled slowly and screenshot the messages. Every line was a knife, but also a piece of evidence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to argue with someone who had slept with my husband and helped siphon money from my son's company. That night, I sent all the screenshots to Daniel with one brief line. "They've started threatening." He called soon after. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine, just mourning what I once believed was real." "I understand," Daniel said. "Save all the messages, all the emails. Don't delete anything. This is intimidation, coercion. Legally, it doesn't help them. In fact, it hurts them." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "What do you think they'll do next?" Daniel paused for a moment. "When guilty people panic," he said, "they usually go one of two ways, begging or threatening. They've already done both today. Stay calm. Keep recording. You're not alone in this." The next morning, when I opened my email, I saw an anonymous message. No name attached, just a blank, unfamiliar address. Subject line: "If you know what's good for you, stop." The body was only a few lines. "If you don't want Aaron to find out everything, withdraw the divorce petition. Some things are better left buried. Don't make us do something no one wants." No signature, none needed. I knew exactly whose tone that resembled. I didn't feel fear. I felt something sadder. They were using my love for my son as leverage. They struck at the softest place, thinking that if they mentioned Aaron, I would retreat. They didn't understand that because of Aaron, I had no choice but to move forward. I printed the email, placed it into a folder, then forwarded it to Daniel. He called within minutes. "How long ago did you get this?" "I just opened it this morning." "Good. Leave it in your inbox. Don't reply. Don't delete anything. This is more evidence. The more we have, the clearer the picture becomes for the court." That evening, Leon didn't come home. No call saying he'd be late. No text. I sat in the living room listening to the wall clock tick. Not until almost 10 p.m. did my phone vibrate. A text from Leon. "I'm staying at a friend's for a few days. I think we need time to cool off." I looked at the message and almost laughed. Time to cool off wasn't for my sake. It was for him, to gather documents, erase traces, call his lawyer, strategize. I didn't reply. The next day, a neighbor mentioned seeing Leon driving out of town early that morning. Sophie didn't show up at the small shop where she worked part-time either. I didn't wonder where they went or who they were staying with. I only understood one thing. When cornered, they chose to run. In the days that followed, the house grew quiet in a different way. No more Leon rummaging in his office, no more midnight trips to the refrigerator. I slept a few hours straight, no longer jolting awake at 3 a.m. from the sound of someone turning over beside me. But I didn't fool myself into thinking it was over. In fact, the quieter things became, the more certain I felt. The real battle was just beginning. One evening, while I sat at the kitchen table sorting through all the evidence I'd gathered, emails, transfers, recordings, messages, threats, I realized my hands no longer shook. Each page was no longer an open wound, but a milestone. Each milestone moved me farther from the darkness Leon and Sophie had created. I organized everything into labeled folders, then placed them into a box and locked it. I used to think only men needed secret safes. Now I understood women need a place for truth, too. That night, before bed, I stood at the doorway of my bedroom, looking at the neatly made side of the bed that used to be his. I didn't feel lonely. I simply felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after a day spent doing something that matters. I turned off the light, lay down, and listened to the wind brushing through the trees outside. In the darkness, I whispered to myself, they can run. They can threaten. They can lie. But this time, I have the law and the truth beside me. I'm no longer the woman standing outside a window holding a fallen waffle with no idea what to do. With that thought, I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I slept through the night, because I knew that tomorrow and the days after I wouldn't be on the defensive anymore. I had filed, I had struck back, and I would see this through to the end. 3 days after Leon left the house, the atmosphere around me shifted completely. Not peace, but the heavy stillness before a storm. I could feel they were planning something. Their panic hiding behind the unusual silence. No messages from Sophie, no calls from Leon. That kind of silence never means peace. It means calculation. That day, I cleaned the house, keeping everything in its place. When a woman prepares for battle, she often straightens the small things first, reminding herself she still controls some part of her life. Around 10 p.m., I was sitting on the couch reading a few of Daniel's notes when someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks, hard and forceful. Not the polite tap of a neighbor returning misplaced mail. This kind of knock carried an urgency, as if the person outside wanted to shatter the quiet I had worked so hard to rebuild. I set the papers down and walked to the door. Through the narrow gap, I saw 2 figures. The porch light illuminated their faces. Leon, Sophie. They stood closer together than usual, not out of affection, but out of fear. I knew instantly they weren't here to apologize. I opened the door just enough to see them clearly. "Margaret," Leon said, trying to keep his voice steady, "we need to talk." I looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were still the same eyes of the man I once loved, once held hands with during late afternoon walks in the park. But now those eyes held a mix of anger and worry. The confidence of a man who thought he controlled everything was gone. "I have nothing to say," I replied calmly. Sophie stepped forward. She wore a long beige coat, her hair pulled back hastily, mascara smudged as if she had been crying or wanted to look like she had been. Her eyes were red, but without the depth of real pain, only the trembling of someone afraid of exposure. "Mom, please, just listen. Don't tear the family apart. Don't make things worse." I narrowed my eyes. Family? I asked. Which family are you talking about? Sophie bit her lip but said nothing. She turned to Leon for help. Leon stepped closer. Margaret, he said quietly, you're overreacting. Divorce. It doesn't have to go this far. You're angry. I get it. But bringing a lawyer into this will only make things messier. I leaned lightly against the door, keeping distance. I'm not angry, I said. I just see the truth. Leon's face tightened. Sophie jumped in immediately, louder. If you're listening to stupid rumors or letting people twist things, Margaret, you have to understand none of that is true. We didn't do anything wrong. I looked at her without blinking. Then why are you afraid? Sophie flinched. Her eyes flashed with panic before she tried to recover her sorrowful expression. Leon suddenly stepped closer, placing his hand on the doorframe, his voice shifting from calm to cold, sharp as a blade. You think you can take me on? You'll have nothing if you continue. No money, no home, no reputation. You're destroying yourself. I tilted my head slightly, meeting his gaze. It was the first time I truly saw the truth in his expression, arrogance barely covering fear. People only threaten when they know they're losing. We'll see, I said, each word slow and steady. Sophie immediately lost control. She grabbed Leon's sleeve, her voice cracking. I told you. If she doesn't stop, Aaron will find out. I don't want him to hate me. Tell her to stop. Do something. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sophie had just blurted out the very thing she had tried so hard to hide behind countless, careful words. Leon spun toward her, his face draining of color. Stop talking. He gritted his teeth, but it was too late. I stood still. My heart didn't race. The only feeling rising in me was clarity. At last, their masks were off. I let them argue for a few more seconds. Sophie stammering that I was ruining everything, Leon trying to regain control before realizing it was already gone. Then I spoke softly, almost in a whisper. Leave. Leon turned back to me. We're not finished. With me, I replied. It ended long ago. I felt the warmth of the phone in my pocket, where the recording app was still running. Every harsh word from Leon, every inadvertent confession from Sophie, all of it was captured. Leon clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing. You think you're so smart, don't you? I didn't answer. I just looked at him with a kind of gaze I probably hadn't given him once in 30 years, the gaze of someone who was no longer afraid. Sophie gripped Leon's sleeve, her voice trembling like a wind chime in a storm. Let's go. If she wants a fight, she'll lose. They turned away, arguing under their breath as they walked. But when they reached the steps, Sophie stopped. She turned her head, looking back at me through the strands of hair falling over her face. A look sharp as a needle, venomous enough that I could almost feel it cutting the air. No more pretending. No more tears, only the poison of a person losing control. I stood there with my hand resting on the door frame until their figures disappeared behind the trees. When I finally closed the door, the house echoed with a deep silence. I leaned my back against it and took a long breath. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear. I sat at the kitchen table with the recorder placed in the center, listening to every part of the conversation again. Their voices in the recording sounded like two sides of an animal cornered, trembling but vicious. I replayed it over and over, not missing a single breath, a single overlapping sentence, a single threat. I sent the file to Daniel with a message. We have more evidence. Daniel replied almost immediately, good, You're doing everything right. From now on, you're the one in control." I set the phone down and looked out the window. The streetlight cast a soft glow on the leaves, trembling in the breeze. No footsteps, no knocking. But in that very quiet, I realized something. I had crossed the line from being a heartbroken wife into becoming a woman who no longer intended to let her life be steered by someone else. And more importantly, I no longer trembled at Leon's name, nor at Sophie's venomous stare. They thought they came to my doorstep to intimidate me, but they didn't know that the moment they stood on that step, I had already taken back the upper hand. I didn't sleep that night. But through those sleepless hours, I didn't feel fear. I thought of only one thing. Now it's my turn. After that poisonous confrontation at my doorstep, the house suddenly felt larger, quieter, yet strangely cold. That sleepless night seemed to age me a few years, but it also gave me something far more important: clarity. The next morning, I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the thin sunlight fall on the trees at the end of the street. My mind still echoed with Sophie's crying, Leon's threats, and my own voice, cold, clear, no longer trembling. In that silence, I knew I needed someone to talk to, not to cry to, but to steady myself. A name surfaced in my mind unexpectedly: Helena. We'd been close friends for almost 20 years, raising children side by side, volunteering at church together, sharing peppermint tea on porch steps in late afternoons. But then her husband was transferred for work. They moved to another state, and life slowly pulled us apart. But Helena, I had never forgotten her. And that morning, I called. The phone rang only 3 times. "Margaret?" Helena's voice held no distance at all. "Are you okay? You sound strange." I couldn't speak for a few seconds. Finally, I exhaled. "Can you come?" "My husband is grabbing the keys. Don't do anything alone," she said, without asking another question. Just an hour later, Helena was standing at my door. A touch of silver at her temples made her look wiser, but her eyes still held the same warm strength I remembered. She didn't say a word. She hugged me for a long time, a hug that cracked the wall I had been building inside myself for weeks. I didn't cry, but I felt something inside me soften like early snow melting in sunlight. "What happened to you?" she asked, gentle but determined. I poured coffee and told her everything, every detail, every moment spent standing outside Sophie's house, hearing Leon laugh inside, every discovery I made in his office, every threat from the night before, every fear of watching my husband turn into a stranger. Helena listened without interrupting, without judging. Only when I reached the part where Leon said, "You'll have nothing if you go against me," did I see her eyes darken. When I finished, Helena sat quietly for a few seconds. Then she placed her hand on mine. "Margaret, you're not the only woman who's gone through this," she said, her voice low but firm. "I was betrayed too, just as filthy. Money was involved in mine as well." I stared at her. "You never told me." "Because I was ashamed," she said with a small smile. "But you know, the most painful part isn't the betrayal. It's realizing how long you lived believing the wrong truth." I understood instantly. She was so right it made me shiver. Helena looked straight at me and continued, "I'm telling you this from the bottom of my heart. Once you lose everything, you stop being afraid." The words sliced through the invisible restraints around my chest. I sat still, then suddenly felt lighter. It was true. I had lost Leon long ago. I was only now willing to face that truth, And when you no longer have anything holding you back, you become stronger. Come with me, Helena said. I want to take you somewhere. That afternoon, Helena drove me to a small wooden house outside town where a group of women gathered weekly. No sign out front, no advertisements, just a self-formed circle. But the way they looked at one another carried a quiet understanding. This is a recovery group for women who've been betrayed, Helena said. Everyone here has gone through what you're facing. I saw several women sitting in a circle, a curly-haired woman in her 50s, a younger woman so young it made my chest ache, barely 30 perhaps. Another wore a headscarf, her eyes long, sad, but steady. When I sat down, no one asked, "Why are you here?" or "Who hurt you?" or "What happened?" No, they didn't ask. An older woman simply looked at me kindly and said, "Welcome. No one comes here when life is peaceful, but everyone who comes here gets stronger." Her words tightened my throat. The session unfolded quietly, not a spill everything and cry meeting, but sharing small steps they had taken to stand back up. The young woman spoke about the day she removed her ex-husband from her bank account. Another shared the first time she went out alone after the divorce, without fearing she was being followed. Another described relearning how to sleep without the sound of a door opening, haunting her. I listened, each story like cool air passing over my own wounds. Not because I wanted them to have suffered, but because I realized my pain wasn't an ending, and I wasn't the only one walking through it. When it was my turn, I didn't share every detail, but I shared enough. I spoke of the double betrayal, the financial deceit, the hidden accounts, the moment I stood outside my daughter-in-law's home, hearing my husband laugh with a younger woman. The group fell silent. Then the oldest woman placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're still standing, which means you're stronger than you think. From now on, let that strength lead you to freedom." On the way home that evening, I looked out the car window. The streets I once viewed as heavy suddenly felt breathable. Helena smiled when she noticed my quietness. "What are you thinking about?" "Freedom," I whispered. Helena nodded. "That's the real goal, not revenge." I turned to her. I thought I wanted revenge, but I just want to be free of Leon, free of the darkness he built around me. "Then remember," Helena said softly, "the truth will free you, but it will also expose those who tried to use you." Back home, I walked into the kitchen, set down my bag, and poured myself a glass of water. The warm light reflected on the oven door, revealing something different in my face. Not younger, not prettier, but clearer, sharper. I walked to the office, opened the evidence box, and organized everything once more. My hands didn't shake. Everything felt defined in a way it hadn't before. Freedom comes only when the truth is revealed. I picked up my phone and opened Daniel's last message. "The hearing will take place sooner than expected. Prepare yourself." I inhaled slowly and exhaled. I had cried enough, feared enough, lost enough. Now it was time to stand tall. In the coming days, I would face Leon, Sophie, their lawyer, and whatever excuses they had rehearsed. But I no longer felt overwhelmed. I had heard stories far more heartbreaking from other women. I had seen Helena rise from her own betrayal, and I understood. No one is going to save me but me. I closed the evidence box and locked it. The storm was coming, but I was no longer the woman trembling outside a window. I would walk into that hearing with open eyes and a steady heart. In the days leading up to the hearing, the suffocating silence Leon and Sophie created shifted into a series of strange actions. like two hooked fish thrashing in a final frantic struggle before the noose tightened. On Monday morning, when I opened the door to get the paper, a massive bouquet of white lilies sat on the step. I recognized instantly that these were the flowers Sophie once said she couldn't stand the smell of. But the small card attached read, "To Mother Margaret, wishing you health and happiness. Sophie." The lavender ink curled delicately, soft enough to seem heartfelt. If I hadn't heard her the other night terrified of Aaron finding out the truth. I set the bouquet on the table without a flicker of emotion. The scent was strong, the falseness even stronger. The next afternoon, a gift box arrived, a cream shawl Sophie once complimented me on during Christmas. Inside was a handwritten letter filled with empty apologies about family bonds, unfortunate misunderstandings, and hoping for forgiveness. I read it all because I needed to see their intent clearly, but not one line stirred anything in me. Not anymore. The next day, Leon sent a very long letter saying he cherished our 30 years together, that he always loved me in his own way, but slipped in lines about how everyone makes mistakes, that we should handle this privately, and ended with a familiar phrase often used by manipulators. "I don't want to hurt you, but if you don't stop, things will get out of hand." I folded the letter and placed it with the rest of the evidence. Those gestures weren't affection. They were the desperate reach of a drowning man trying to pull someone down with him. I wasn't that someone. That weekend, around noon, the doorbell rang. When I answered, a young police officer stood on the porch, polite and serious. "Mrs. Doyle, we've received a report that you've been harassing and threatening Ms. Sophie Doyle over the past several weeks. I'm here to verify the information." I straightened, hand resting lightly on the door. No panic, no shock. The only thing I felt was a cold certainty that they had begun attacking the place they thought I was weakest, my credibility and composure. "I understand," I said. "Would you like to come in?" I led him to the kitchen and offered him a glass of water. He took out a notebook and asked each question according to protocol. I answered calmly, so calmly even I marveled at it. "I haven't contacted Sophie except to respond when she called me. And here, every threatening message, every letter, every anonymous email, I've kept all of them." I handed him the evidence folder I had prepared. He flipped through it, reading a few of Sophie's messages and the anonymous note. His eyebrows drew together slightly. "You've kept remarkably calm," he said quietly. "I'm tired of letting other people write my story," I answered. I signed my statement and called Daniel. The officer waited to confirm the details. Daniel picked up quickly, his tone steady but edged with steel. "Mrs. Doyle handled it correctly. Officer, I want to ensure every piece of evidence she provided is properly recorded. This is not a harassment case. This is a clear attempt to discredit my client right before the hearing." The officer nodded. I realized that when I looked through the documents. "We'll forward this file to the Internal Investigation Unit. Thank you for your cooperation." When he left, I closed the door and let out a long breath, not out of fear, but because it had never been clearer. They were playing their final chess moves, hoping to push me off the high ground. 3 days later, when I brought the trash out to the curb, I saw Leon crouch near the entrance to my yard. He didn't know I was standing behind him watching. Leon was digging through my trash, opening each bag, flipping through every cardboard piece, checking every small note. Looking for what? Signs of psychological instability? Something similar to the story he once used to justify his own behavior? Something to convince the court that I was not mentally sound when I filed the petition. I stood still, saying nothing. Watching that man, someone I had trusted for so long, on his knees in my garbage, my heart didn't ache anymore. It was simply empty. Eventually, Leon realized I was standing there. He shot upright, his face flushing, then paling. "Margaret, I was just looking for whatever dignity you still have left in there?" I asked softly. Leon opened his mouth, but no words came. Then he walked away quickly, like someone gasping for air. I looked at the torn open trash bags and saw myself, 30 years ago, collapsing if I had witnessed this. But the woman I was now simply put on gloves and cleaned each bag. When I brought the trash back, Daniel called. "Leon just hired a private investigator," he said bluntly. "They're trying to find anything to claim you're unstable. You need to keep everything calm and consistent. Understood?" "I know," I answered. "He's desperate." Daniel exhaled softly into the phone. "Exactly. When a liar hits the end of the road, their actions become ridiculous and meaningless, but you must stay mentally strong as steel." After that, I called Helena. When she heard about Leon digging through my trash, she burst into laughter until tears formed at the corners of her eyes. "See?" Helena said through her incredulous laughter. "Desperate people always reveal who they really are. You don't need to attack. They dig their own holes." "But I don't feel satisfaction," I said quietly. "I just feel sad for what once existed." Helena stopped laughing, "And that's exactly why you'll win. You're not fighting to destroy them. You're fighting to be free." I stood there for a moment. Then I said, "I will win, but I want to win the right way. By the law." The night before the hearing, I opened all the windows and let the autumn wind sweep in. The cool air was so crisp I could hear dry leaves skimming along the walkway. I laid all the documents on the kitchen table, each folder organized exactly as Daniel instructed. Bank transfers, emails, threatening messages, recording of the confrontation, photos of forged signatures, timeline notes, and Leon's unusual behaviors. I looked at everything and realized each small piece was a step I had taken to walk out of the darkness of that marriage. When I closed the box, I didn't hear my heartbeat pounding anymore, only a calmness, a new kind of calm that had never existed in those 30 years. As I placed the box into the trunk of my car, I whispered, "Enough, Margaret. Tomorrow you take your life back." On the morning of the hearing, I dressed simply and neatly, not to impress, not to look strong, but to show the woman I was becoming, steady, clear, and no longer controlled by fear. When I stepped outside, the early sunlight touched my face, warm and gentle, like a quiet blessing. I locked the door and turned away from the old road. My heart was strangely calm. No more trembling, no more hesitation, no more holding on to anything. The day of the hearing had arrived, and I walked into it knowing I had never been stronger than I was now. That morning, the air inside the courthouse was as heavy as winter mist, yet inside me there was a strange quiet. I walked down the hallway holding the evidence box, my steps even, as if measuring my own breath. Helena sat waiting in the back row and nodded gently when she saw me. Daniel stood by the courtroom door, adjusting his tie before giving me a reassuring smile. "You're more prepared than anyone I've ever met," he said. I answered with a nod. My heart was steady, my hands unshaken. I had been preparing for this moment since the day I saw Leon's car parked at Sophie's house. When the courtroom door opened, Leon and Sophie walked in first. I stood far enough to observe without emotion pulling at me. Leon wore a dark blue suit, a wine-colored tie, his face clean-shaven, hair neatly combed as if preparing to go on television. Sophie walked beside him in an ivory business dress, lightly made up, her eyes slightly red as if trying to appear sad but resilient. They looked more like actors playing a misunderstood couple than two people about to have their cruelty exposed. I took my seat. My calmness made both of them pause. Sophie shot me a tense glance, while Leon turned away as though ignoring his own unease. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I inhaled deeply, then sat, placing my hands on my lap. Daniel began. His voice was low, steady, unmistakably clear. Your Honor, today we will present a series of evidence showing that my client, Mrs. Margaret Doyle, was financially exploited, severely deceived, and intentionally placed at a disadvantage during her 30-year marriage by her husband and daughter-in-law. The opposing attorney reacted immediately. Your Honor, my clients deny all allegations. This is a family misunderstanding, and the couple can reconcile. Daniel raised a hand politely but firmly. Permission to continue. We have evidence, not speculation. The judge nodded. Proceed. Daniel opened the first folder. He presented each financial document Leon had signed under my name. He held up hotel receipts, bank transfers to Sophie Doyle, all dated during Leon's non-existent business trips. Then came the emails between Leon and a shady accountant discussing shifting funds before Aaron finds out. Sophie's face visibly drained of color. Leon sat upright, trying to maintain composure, but I saw the small twitch in his jaw. Daniel continued, and here. He opened the audio file. Is the conversation between Mr. Leon and Ms. Sophie, recorded by my client the night they came to her home to pressure her. I had listened to the recording dozens of times, but hearing it now, under bright courtroom lights, felt surreal, like listening to the autopsy of my old life. Sophie's shaky voice filled the courtroom. If Aaron finds out, I'm done. Do something. Leon's voice followed, low and furious. She'll have nothing if she goes against me. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Sophie immediately cried out. I didn't know she recorded it. I was just upset. Her attorney tugged her sleeve, trying to quiet her, but Sophie had lost control. She turned to Leon, her voice cracking. You said you'd handle everything. You promised. What am I supposed to do now? Leon gritted his teeth. Stop talking, Sophie. I watched them, not with joy, not with gloating, only a deep sadness. Sadness for the man I once loved and for the young woman who helped destroy my family and was now trapped in the web they both spun. The judge struck the gavel. Order! But Sophie was unraveling. She pointed at Leon. You made me do everything. You told me to use my account to hide it. You said Aaron would never find out. You promised. Silence fell over the courtroom. Leon spun toward her, face reddening. Are you insane? What makes you say that? You did, Sophie nearly screamed. Their attorney looked defeated. Daniel rose, calm as ever. Your Honor, my client has stated nothing beyond the truth, and now the truth has revealed itself. He moved to the final section. We request 1. The dissolution of marriage as Mrs. Margaret Doyle petitioned. 2. A fair division of assets, excluding documents forged by Mr. Leon. 3. A separate criminal investigation regarding financial misconduct involving their son's company. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Doyle, would you like to speak? I stood. My legs were steady, astonishing even to me. I didn't speak long. Your Honor, I said, my voice low but clear, I lost my husband long before I learned he was unfaithful. I lost my family long before I learned they were deceiving me. But the deepest pain wasn't the betrayal. It was that they believed I wasn't strong enough to stand up. Today, I only want to reclaim my life and protect my son from the damage they have caused. Then I sat. The room fell silent. The opposing counsel had nothing left. The evidence was overwhelming. Sophie's confession, the recording, the finances, the forged signatures, and my calm. After a brief recess, the judge delivered the ruling. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court hereby rules the petition for divorce is granted. Mrs. Margaret Doyle retains her rightful share of assets, excluding forged documents. All irregular financial activity will be forwarded to the appropriate investigators for review. Leon bowed his head. Sophie burst into sobs. Daniel placed a hand lightly on my shoulder and whispered, "Congratulations, you've won." I nodded. Not joyful, not triumphant, only lighter, as if I had finally set down a burden after an endless journey. The hearing ended. I stepped out of the courtroom, the door closing behind me, and a breath of fresh air touched my face. I had walked through the truth, and I was still standing. After the hearing, life moved slower, clearer, as if a thick fog had finally lifted to reveal the true outline of the world around me. I no longer woke with tightness in my chest, no longer listened for Leon's footsteps in the hallway, no longer wondered what lie he'd choose that day. All of it receded, becoming a closed door I no longer owed myself to reopen. But for Leon, every other door was quietly closing. News of the hearing spread quickly. Within 2 days, the local paper published the first article outlining the financial fraud investigation at the company my son co-owned. They didn't mention my name, but Leon's was printed in full. Words like embezzlement, misuse of position, and unauthorized transfers were bolded. Reading the article on my screen, I didn't feel joy nor satisfaction. I only saw a man shoveling his own grave, bit by bit, until he finally fell into it. The company forced Leon to step aside. But step aside in these situations always means permanently gone. They couldn't keep someone tied to financial misconduct, especially someone who had touched his own son's assets. I learned this from a call with Aaron. My son's voice trembled so much that I had to sit down at the kitchen table when I picked up. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I don't understand how Dad could do that to you, to me." I closed my eyes, listening to my son's shaky breathing on the other end. For years, I had imagined this moment. I would tell him everything. He would hurt. Then we'd hold each other and cry. But reality was different. My voice sounded low, soft, and calm. So calm I barely recognized myself. Live better than your parents ever did. That's all. I heard Aaron let out a small sob. I will. I promise. When I hung up, my heart didn't ache anymore. Maybe because that pain had already been worn down to its very end, leaving behind a new space. Empty, but not desolate. The next day, I gathered the last of Leon's belongings. Old dress shirts, a few thick books he once said I wasn't knowledgeable enough to read, a box of buttons, worn-down work shoes, and the watch he loved, the one Sophie had given him for his birthday. I put everything into 3 large bags and set them out on the curb beside the trash bins. The sun was gentle that day, the wind brushing through the row of maple trees, and I looked at those bags as if they were 30 years of burden sliding off my shoulders. Not a single tear fell, no tightness in my throat like in the early days. I turned back into the house, closed the door, and the room suddenly felt wider, brighter, like it finally had space to breathe. Leon's friends, the ones who had gathered at my house every weekend, called me Sweet Margie, praised Leon as a level-headed, solid man. All disappeared. No one called to check on me. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered help. They chose a safe distance from a man sinking fast, and I realized they were never truly friends. One afternoon, I went to the supermarket to buy a few things for dinner. While standing by the dairy section, I caught a familiar figure at the edge of my vision, Leon. He stood there holding an empty plastic basket, shoulders slumped, dress shirt wrinkled, hair noticeably grayer after only a few weeks. When he turned and saw me, his eyes widened before instantly looking down. Leon turned toward another aisle as if he wanted to disappear from the world that very moment. I stayed still. I didn't walk toward him. I didn't turn away. I simply watched. Leon fumbled, set the basket down, and headed quickly for the front exit. I noticed his hand gripping the strap of his coat, trembling slightly. The man who once threatened me with a voice full of authority now avoided me like a student caught cheating. As the automatic doors opened, he didn't look back. And in that instant, I understood. I no longer hated him. There was no sting of betrayal cutting deep, no lingering why chasing me through every night, no tug of war between love and anger, regret and fury. All that remained was release, a wide, clean, peaceful emptiness, like a room freshly cleared of dust. That evening, back home, I opened the window and let the night breeze drift into the living room. I sat on the sofa, holding the old pillow I had kept for 10 years, and exhaled slowly. After months buried under threats, betrayal, and deceit, this peace reached me like an unexpected gift. Not given, not granted. I claimed it myself. I opened the door to my own life and stepped out of the locked room I had stayed in for 30 years. No Leon behind me, no Sophie lurking at the doorway. Just me and a wide sky opening up. If someone had asked me then how I felt seeing Leon in the supermarket, I would have said, I wasn't happy and I wasn't hurt, and I just felt light. Light like someone finally letting go of a stone carried for too long. Light like someone stepping out of a house that had shut out the sun. Light like the first step of a person who has found themselves again. I didn't hate anymore. I was simply free. I left the supermarket that afternoon feeling as though I had placed a perfect period at the end of a long, exhausting chapter. And what surprised me was I didn't need to write another word in that chapter. It had closed itself neatly and firmly with the moment I walked away from the aisle where Leon stood with his head lowered. A few weeks later, I began doing something I once thought I'd never have the courage to do: selling the old house. The house I had lived in for more than 30 years, where our wedding photo once hung, where Aaron came home from the hospital, where laughter, arguments, hurried morning footsteps all lived. I stood in the living room on the day I signed the sale papers, watching sunlight spill through the windows, each floating dust particle drifting like memories reluctant to leave their last refuge. But then I understood. The house had fulfilled its purpose, and I had changed. I needed a new place to begin. I moved into a small cottage by the sea at the end of a white stone road where each morning the sound of the waves replaced the dripping of the coffee machine, and the scent of salt water touched my shoulder like a gentle reminder of how far I had come. The new house was small, fit for one person, but full of light. Each window felt like a painting that changed through the day: misty mornings, shimmering noon, amber gold dusk, deep night like unspoken thoughts. I planted lavender by the porch and placed a wooden chair beneath the awning to listen to the ocean speak at sunset. I began writing, not heavy things, writing the way one breathes. I started a small blog, The Gentle Shore, where I shared my mother's waffle recipe, the dishes Erin loved as a child, and short reflections on my healing process. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but within weeks, the first comments appeared. Your story helped me get out of bed after 3 months of depression. I lived through a marriage exactly like that. Thank you. Because of you, I finally reached out to a lawyer. Each message felt like a small grain of sand warming my heart, building a new shore, steady and soft. I realized my life didn't end at betrayal. It began when I shared my truth with the world in a voice calm and generous. One afternoon, while I was making orange blossom tea, I heard news about Leon. An old acquaintance texted that he had lost his position. The investigation was ongoing and his reputation was nearly beyond repair. He had moved into a rental apartment in the suburbs, living alone, no longer invited to gatherings. Sophie had left the city, drowning in debt, her professional prospects collapsing within months. No one from her husband's family wanted to contact her anymore. I read the message, set my phone down, and only shrugged. Not because I felt they deserved it. No, simply because I no longer cared. Their path had split from mine entirely, and the door I closed long ago had been smoothed over by sea wind as if it had never existed. One late autumn afternoon, I took the key to my old house down to the beach. I held it in my hand for a long time, the small key that once opened laughter, tears, reconciliation dinners, and long nights of silent endurance. Then I threw it into the sea. The sound of it hitting the water was faint, but inside me it echoed like thunder. I am free. Not free from Leon, not free from Sophie, but free from the old version of myself, the one who stayed silent for too long. There on the sand I sat as the wind lifted my hair and the silver waves rolled in and out like breathing. I realized I was happy in the most mature, quiet, and profound way I had ever known, happy to be myself. That night, in the cottage glowing warm with a lamplight, I wrote my first story in years. But this time, I didn't write to remember the pain. I wrote to see how I had walked through it. I wrote to remind myself some things we think are endings are simply doorways to new chapters. And the moment I placed the final period, I understood. Anyone who reads to the end of this story must be searching for a strength of their own, a comfort, a small light, a doorway, a gentle shore where the heart can rest. And so, before closing this journey, I want to send one message from the heart. Thank you, you, somewhere out there in this wide world, for walking with me through every part of this story, every wound, every step of rising again. I don't know where you're from or how you found this video, but I hope my story brings you something soft and real. If you've lived through a pain like mine, feel free to leave a comment. If you're searching for strength, write a few words so I know you're not alone. And if you'd like to keep traveling with me through more stories, please like, subscribe, or share this video, not for me, but for anyone out there who needs a small light to keep going. Thank you for being here at the end of this story. I hope you find your own peace.